Chapter 41. Little Chi stretched and jumped off the bamboo bed. He slowly walked to the side of the formation. The spirit stones themselves were not bright, but under the activation of the formation, the entire room became slightly bright. 1200 KSW net. When the 7 brightest spirit stones were connected, they formed the shape of the Big Dipper. Little Chi slowly reached out with his furry paw and lightly pressed on the edge of the formation. He looked like he had come to see what Meng Chi was doing out of curiosity. Meng Chi glanced at him and ordered, "Be careful, Little Chi, don't touch it." She took a deep breath and slowly stepped into the formation. Abundant spiritual energy instantly enveloped her entire body. The Ling energy contained in 8th grade spirit stones in the 3000 worlds was about the same as the Ling energy in a cultivator who had just broken through and entered the stage of Mahayana. However, the cultivators could not directly use the Ling energy in the spirit stones to cultivate. People had tried in the past. They were disappointed to find that even if they tried to activate the Ling energy in the spirit stones, it would quickly dissipate and could not be absorbed into the body. No one could explain the specific reason. They could only guess that the Ling energy in the spirit stones was of a different origin from the Ling energy that the cultivators needed. The cultivators of the 3000 worlds relied on breathing to absorb the Ling energy in the surroundings and refine it in their bodies for their own use. The more Ling energy accumulated, the more it changed from quantity to quality. This was a breakthrough in cultivation. People with high cultivation talent could easily turn the Ling energy in the surroundings to their own use. People with low cultivation talent usually worked twice the effort for half the result. Meng Chi was not especially stupid, but she could not be said to be talented. She closed her eyes and sat cross-legged in the center of the formation. Meng Chi's master had disliked her cultivation progress for being too slow, so he had created the formation so that she could turn the Ling energy in the spirit stones to her own use. In the end, Meng Chi had managed to enter the stage of Jindan before her medical skills reached 4th grade. She did not let her cultivation level drag down her medical skills too much. The little white tiger looked at the young girl wrapped in Ling energy. The faint light flashed, and caused her skin to appear even whiter. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly, and beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. His eyes flickered as well, and the Big Dipper, which had been hidden, reappeared in his azure eyes. The stars floated up and down, and there seemed to be thin starlight around them. If one looked closely, they would find that the traces of starlight were very similar to the formation drawn by Meng Chi. If one had to point out a difference, the array that Meng Chi drew was much cruder. However, the essence was the same. The 7 sparkling spirit stones seemed to reflect the Big Dipper in Little Chi's eyes. He looked at the scene in front of him silently. The Yarrow Xiao of the Yarrow world had different cultivation methods from Xiaozha. The cultivation of the 3000 worlds was completely against the will of the heavens, seizing the Tao of heaven and earth for their own use. Because of this, they walked step by step with great steadiness. The spirit sea in one's body would expand naturally as one's cultivation level increased. The advancement of his cultivation base was also a matter of course. The demonic cultivators, on the other hand, could absorb spiritual chi with every breath they took. Ordinary demon cultivators would also have some kind of star projection on their bodies. With the help of the star projection, they would be able to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Sky Yarrow usually had star formations on their bodies, and all the spiritual chi in the world could be used by them. What limited their cultivation was usually the growth rate of their spirit sea, which could not keep up with the rate of accumulation of Ling energy. Therefore, many times, the Ling energy that the Yarrow Xiao absorbed into their bodies was wasted. Because of this, the 3000 worlds and the Yarrow world had maintained a delicate balance for tens of thousands of years. There was no overwhelming suppression from any side. Little Chi's gaze gradually became calm, and the Big Dipper star in his eyes disappeared. He looked at the formation in front of him. This formation was still very crude. If it was used for cultivation, it could at most allow Meng Chi to break through to Jindan. If she wanted to break through from Jindan to Yuanying, then a more powerful and complete formation was needed. No matter how crude the formation was, Meng Chi was using the cultivation method of the Yarrow Xiao to increase her cultivation. This was a very, very frightening thing. Little Chi's furry front paw slowly rose. He looked at the side of Meng Chi's face reflected in the light of the formation. The girl seemed to trust him greatly. She just let him stay by her side with ease, without any intention of guarding against him at all. If the Shouja of the 3,000 worlds mastered this kind of formation, how terrifying would it be? Little Seven couldn't be any clearer. That meant that most of the greatest obstacles in their cultivation had been swept away. The large sects of the 3,000 worlds and 4 Jie could use the power of the sects to increase the cultivation speed of their top experts by at least 5 times. In the long run, the delicate balance of the 3 worlds would be broken. It had to be said that compared to the Mo Xiu and Mo beings of the Mo territories, Yarrow Xiu were considered smarter. Especially Sky Yarrow. Sky Yarrow would not lose to the wise of the 3,000 worlds. If they really had to compare, the average intelligence of the Shouja of the 3,000 worlds was much higher than the Yarrow and Mo territories. Little Chi's front paw rose even higher. He was too familiar with this formation. If his paw stepped down, he had 100 ways to instantly, but light flashed through his blue eyes. His raised front paw did not fall down. In the valley, while the girl had been extremely rude, she had truly wanted to save him. She was a chi refinement cultivator and was not rich. Her bracelets and storage bags were of the lowest grade. She had never been stingy with spirit stones to treat her injuries. Little Chi was still hesitating. "Ua!" Meng Chi suddenly grunted. Her body trembled slightly. The spirit energy was pouring in too quickly, and it was very difficult for her to absorb it. At this moment, 2 soft sounds were heard from the formation. "Be careful." Meng Chi suddenly opened her eyes. Majestic spirit energy swept through her body in an instant. Her spiritual ocean expanded, and her realm rose from chi refinement to foundation establishment. At the same time, with her as the center, the chaotic spirit energy in the formation quickly surged in all directions. Without thinking, Meng Chi leaned over and hugged Little Chi. She leaned over and protected the little white tiger's fluffy body in her arms. "Ua!" Meng Chi grunted again. Shouja's cultivation was always going against the heavens. From chi refinement to foundation establishment, there would be no tribulation. However, seizing the chi of heaven and earth in an instant would also cause the spirit energy around a person to become chaotic like a storm and sweep in all directions. Meng Chi, who had just advanced by a large realm, had abundant spirit energy in her body, forming a layer of solid armor around her body. Being hit by the chaotic spirit energy storm would not cause any harm other than great pain. In that instant, Meng Chi's face turned pale. The room became calm again. She exhaled and let go of Little Chi. Meng Chi looked the little white tiger up and down and carefully checked the wound on its front paw. "Are you okay?" she asked. Meng Chi reached out and pinched Little Chi's ear. "Didn't I tell you not to come over?" She carelessly rubbed the white fur on its head and pinched Little Chi's small semicircular ears. "If I hurt you again, it'll be troublesome." Little Chi did not move. He stared at Meng Chi in a daze. It was just a chi refinement cultivator advancing to foundation establishment. Even if his injuries were 10 times worse now, he would not be hurt by such a spirit energy storm. "What's wrong?" Meng Chi pinched his ear again. Little Chi suddenly realized that he was still lying in the other's arms. The young girl's soft body was carefully protecting him. A light medicinal fragrance, as well as an unknown but pleasant smell, surrounded him. The little white tiger suddenly turned its head and struggled desperately in Meng Chi's arms. "Huh!" Meng Chi was stunned. Little Chi had already jumped off the ground and ran back to the bamboo bed. He looked at Meng Chi from afar, still in shock. The feeling that the other party had taken advantage of his serious injuries in the valley to do that to him came again. This time, the other party clearly did not do anything. He still felt as if a shiver ran down his spine. This was a feeling that he had never felt before, no matter how terrifying his opponent was. Meng Chi tilted her head and did not take it seriously. She sat down cross-legged again and scanned the inside of her body with her divine sense. Compared to when she was in chi refinement, her spirit ocean was 3 times larger. It was full of spirit energy, as if it would overflow at any time. This meant that she had finally succeeded in foundation establishment. Meng Qi slowly sighed and opened her eyes. She was in a good mood and stood up while humming a tune. She cleaned up the traces of the array on the floor and transferred the things she needed in the room into a new storage bag. After finishing all this, Meng Qi looked around. She had lived in this room for more than half a year in this life and also for more than half a year in her previous life. In fact, in a cultivator's long life, a year was nothing. However, Meng Qi had experienced everything from life to death, and from death to life. When she thought everything was over, she opened her eyes and saw this familiar yet strange room. That feeling could not be described with words. Little Qi. Meng Qi walked towards the little white tiger. She took out the beast house and placed it on the bamboo bed. Then she rubbed the little white tiger's fluffy head. "We are leaving here." Little Qi looked at the beast house and then turned to look at Meng Qi in a daze. His breath was full of the girl's faint medicinal fragrance. It was as if this continued, even his body would be covered with the same scent. "Let's go." Meng Qi picked up Little Qi and put him in the beast house. She put the beast house into her storage bag and looked around again. She turned and strode to the door. With a soft creak, the door opened. Sunlight instantly hit Meng Qi in the face and coated her with a faint layer of soft light. Not far from the door, Qin Xiumo and Chu Tianfeng were whispering something. They heard the sound of the door opening and turned to look. "Are we leaving?" Qin Xiumo asked. His voice was a little lazy and casual. Meng Qi even had the illusion that the two of them were old friends who had known each other for many years, and this was just an ordinary greeting. "Yes." She was dazed for a moment and nodded. "Let's go." Qin Xiumo handed her a small brocade pouch. Meng Qi took it and looked at it. There was a lot of cold sky grass in it, as well as some herbs from around the Cool Breeze Valley. Qin Xiumo raised his chin. "What if it works?" He ordered the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley to pick it. The water of the cold pond was bone-chilling. Even if the disciples in the foundation establishment stage jumped down and came back up, they would be so cold that their lips would turn white and their teeth would chatter. They would tremble and be unable to speak. Qin Xiumo watched them pick the cold skygrass to pay off their debts. Especially the 3 female disciples. After going down twice, they cried and refused to go into the water again. In fact, the male disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley were also miserable, but when they saw their junior sisters crying like that, they volunteered to take on the work themselves and begged Qin Xiumo to let the female cultivators go. Qin Xiumo didn't say anything at that time. He stood coldly on the edge of the cold pond to supervise the work, but what appeared in his mind was the way Meng Qi went into the water to pick the cold skygrass without hesitation when she treated his injury. TSK. Qin Xiumo couldn't help but sigh when he thought about it now. Only crying children would get candy. Meng Qi always looked calm and collected. It was really. Qin Xiumo stared at Meng Qi in front of him in a daze. It was really. He suddenly raised the corner of his mouth, and a touch of softness flashed through his eyes. "Let's go," he said. "I owe you so many spirit stones. The sooner we start work and pay it off, the sooner I'll feel more at ease." Meng Qi shrugged. She put the brocade pouch into her storage bag and then quickly calculated, although there are a lot of these herbs, their grades are low and they're very common. They're not worth much. It's okay. Qin Xiumo shrugged indifferently. Little drops make a mickle. You can keep them first. Okay. Meng Qi didn't refuse. These herbs were useless to Qin Xiumo anyway. You're really not coming with us? Chu Tianfeng looked at Meng Qi and then at Qin Xiumo. He regretted it. He really regretted it. Why wasn't he so thick-skinned? He could also shamelessly pretend to be poor and then not pay back the debt. No. Meng Qi shook her head. Young Palace Master Chu, take care. She cupped her hands at Chu Tianfeng and walked out side by side with Qin Xiumo. I'm going to the library. Elder Yang Mingfeng should have already returned. Meng Qi must say goodbye to him. Some of the Cool Breeze Valley disciples had already left the mountain. There were also some who wanted to follow the Burning Sky Palace back to the Burning City and were now gathered together. In the Cool Breeze Valley, it suddenly became quiet. Meng Qi and Qin Xiumo walked all the way to the library and didn't even meet a single disciple on the way. The sect, which used to be bustling, became desolate in the blink of an eye. Outside the book collection pavilion, it was still quiet. Meng Qi stood outside the door and said respectfully, "Disciple Meng Qi is here to bid farewell to Elder Yang. Come in." A mellow and gentle voice came from the library. Meng Qi motioned for Qin Shumo to wait for her outside. She pushed the door open and walked in. Yang Mingfeng sat cross-legged on a chair on the first floor of the library. He was still wearing the simple green robe and didn't seem to have changed from before. It was as if the things that happened these days had never happened. "Elder Yang." Meng Qi bowed respectfully to him. "I'm leaving the Cool Breeze Valley." "Yes." Yang Mingfeng nodded. "That's good too." He paused and suddenly asked, "Meng Qi, if there are no spirit stones and no remorse, and those disciples still suspect you, guard against you, and slander you, will you treat them or not?" Meng Qi was stunned. Without waiting for her answer, Yang Mingfeng asked again, "If Lu Qingran is also injured, will you treat them or not?" Yang Mingfeng opened his half-closed eyes and glanced at Meng Qi's face. Without giving her a chance to think, he raised his voice and urged, "Answer me." "If I can, I will," Meng Qi said. A smile flashed across Yang Mingfeng's eyes. "Can you teach me the treatment method of the divine devouring vine?" he asked again. "Of course." Meng Qi took out a bamboo scroll from her storage bag and handed it to Elder Yang respectfully. "I took a risk and used the most clumsy method to treat the divine devouring vine's injury." She was not lying. In her previous life, when she met Su Junmo, Meng Qi was only a foundation establishment cultivator. The number of cultivation techniques she could use and the number of pills she could refine was not much more than what she had now. Even among all the medical cultivators in the Trichilia Chasm, it was not enough. In fact, no matter if it was Su Junmo, Chu Tianfeng, or Qin Shumo, Meng Qi did not use any particularly powerful cultivation techniques or pills to save them. In her previous life, she had already vaguely sensed that there was no difference between cultivation techniques and pills. There were similarities between poisons and diseases in the world. Sometimes, even if it looked particularly powerful, it could be treated with the most basic cultivation techniques and pills. After her rebirth, this idea became more and more mature. That was why she cultivated all the low-level cultivation techniques that medical cultivators knew to the highest level that she could now cultivate. If it can save people, it's a good method. There is no difference between clumsy and smart. Yang Mingfeng took the bamboo scroll and waved his hand. 3 bamboo scrolls flew out of his storage bag and slowly landed in Meng Qi's hand. Yang Mingfeng explained, "This is what I've seen and heard while traveling in the East all these years. I'm using it to exchange for the method to cure the divine devouring vine." He looked at Meng Qi and said, "I'm also going on a long journey. If fate wills it, we will meet again in the future. Go ahead." After Yang Mingfeng finished speaking, he closed his eyes again. His body was full of spirit qi. When he was in seclusion, it was obvious that he had advanced by a small level. Meng Qi bowed respectfully to him again, held the 3 bamboo scrolls, and turned to leave the library. She lowered her head and looked at the warm bamboo scrolls in her palm. Then, she sent some spirit qi into them. The contents of the bamboo scrolls immediately appeared in front of her. Elder Yang Mingfeng had been traveling all year round and had saved countless people. He was so knowledgeable that he was even more knowledgeable than Meng Qi before her rebirth. Elder Yang said that these 3 bamboo scrolls were used to exchange for the method to cure the divine devouring vine. Meng Qi only needed to read a few lines to know how precious these bamboo scrolls were. Anyone who wanted to go far on the path of medical cultivation would be willing to pay a huge price in exchange for these 3 bamboo scrolls. Meng Qi could not help but turn back and look at the library again. The door of the library had been closed again. Cool Breeze Valley was in a precarious situation. No disciple was in the mood to come here at this time. "Let's go." Qin Shumo, who was waiting outside, came forward and said in a low voice, "The people from Burning Sky Palace have just left." "Okay." Meng Qi nodded. She kept the bamboo scrolls. "Let's go." Meng Qi turned back and walked down Cool Breeze Valley. This time, she did not summon a paper crane. She walked down the mountain slowly along the mountain path. Qin Shumo followed behind her silently. When they were about to see Cool Breeze Town, he asked, "Where are we going first?" "I want to go first, Meng Qi, wait for me." Before Meng Qi could finish speaking, Su Junmo's clear voice suddenly came from behind. Qin Xiumor frowned. Meng Qi also turned her head and looked at the way they came, speechless. Su Junmo, who had disappeared for several days, quickly walked to them. "Where are you going?" He quickly added, "I can pay spirit stones. Please take me." Chapter 42. Heavens Beyond Heaven, on the floating island where the Xian auction was located. There was a green breeze pill on the desk in front of Xiong Linmo. The small round pill didn't look very eye-catching, nor was it a precious high-grade pill. Sigh. He sighed softly and placed the pill into a small porcelain bottle with his palms together. Sitting alone at home, sighing. A woman's voice came from outside Xiong Linmo's door. "Is this a young man missing a beautiful woman?" "Stop joking." Xiong Linmo smiled bitterly and looked at the door. Xue Jinwen was leaning against the door in a red dress. She smiled lazily and seductively. "I don't have a beautiful woman to miss." He looked at her. "Why are you here?" "Someone from my family told me that the decennial Medical Cultivators Assembly will be held in the East Border, Descending Star City. Do you want to go?" "Huh?" Xiong Linmo was stunned. Descending Star City? Descending Star City in the East Border was a familiar name. One of the three major sects in the East Border, the Descending Star Pavilion, was there. But why Descending Star City? Xiong Linmo did not understand. The Descending Star Pavilion is the most powerful sword sect in the East Border. The Medical Cultivators Assembly was a grand medical cultivators event held once every 10 years in the 3000 worlds. It was first held 700 years ago and had been going on for hundreds of years. When the time came, medical cultivators from all over the world would gather and share their experiences. The most important thing was to choose the members of the Apricot Alliance who would be in charge of communicating with the medical cultivators in the Four Realms for the next 10 years. Besides, there would also be some competitions to give new medical cultivators or cultivators who had just stepped onto the path of medical cultivation a chance to shine. It was also an opportunity for some itinerant cultivators or medical cultivators like Xiong Linmo who were originally from weak sects. They might be chosen by the major sects and their fates would change. Xiong Linmo valued this opportunity very much. He had been preparing for it since 3 years ago. However, the Medical Cultivators Assembly was usually held by the major medical cultivators in the Four Realms. The assembly 10 years ago was held in the West Border where Xue Jinwen was located. It was held by the Xue family. Descending Star Pavilion? I heard that they have always been fair and upright. Xiong Linmo looked at Xue Jinwen in confusion. But that's the holy land for sword cultivators. It has nothing to do with us medical cultivators. Xue Jinwen raised her eyebrows and smiled charmingly. The Medical Cultivation Conference has never been set as only medical cultivation sects can host it. I heard. She was born in the Xue family and was a disciple of one of the top 3 sects in the Western Kingdom. She was much more informed than Xiong Linmo. The young new pavilion master of the Falling Star Pavilion fell in love with a female medical cultivator. In order to win the beauty's smile, he worked hard to fight for this opportunity. TSK. Xue Jinwen chuckled. His eyes were filled with undisguised envy. This can be considered spending a lot of money to make a beauty smile. Heroic, generous, romantic. I like it. Xiong Linmo, why are you hesitating? Xue Jinwen smiled. Don't tell me that you don't intend to attend this spiritual conference in Descending Star City. She paused for a moment before continuing. I heard that you've been preparing to go to the Eastern Border during this period of time, so you've been coming here less often. Isn't it great that the Medical Cultivation Conference is held there as well? That's true. Xiong Linmo nodded. He stood up and bowed to Xue Jinwen. Thank you, Daoist Xue. I'll go and prepare to go to the Eastern Border. You. He looked at Xue Jinwen hesitantly. You'll be going too, right? Of course. Xue Jinwen nodded. She turned to look afar. From where she was, she could not see the disciples of the various sects who were looking for little Qi on the floating island of the Xian auction hall. Xue Jinwen smiled again. Do you think little Qi will be going too? Xiong Linmo smiled bitterly again. How would I know? It's been a lot more crowded here recently. I heard that there are people coming here every day with all kinds of excuses just to find out more about little Qi. That's right. Xue Jinwen's eyes shone brightly. I don't know if that delicate and cute little face is her disguise or her real appearance. She looks like she's only 17 or 18 years old. If she's really that young, I wonder which powerful hidden sect can cultivate such a monstrous genius. If that's the case, little Qi probably won't go to the medical cultivation conference. Xiong Linmo was a little disappointed. I wonder if she'll come to Sky Beyond Heaven again. She'll come, Xue Jinwen said confidently. Last time, she asked me about some materials and how to order medicinal herbs. I guess. She narrowed her eyes. The little girl was probably sent out by her sect's masters to train alone. She's smart and good at making money. However, the things that her masters gave her should be very limited. So she'll come again. After all, Sky Beyond Heaven. Xue Jinwen raised his eyes and looked at the seventh floating island that was floating in the sky far away. If you can't find what you need even in Sky Beyond Heaven, it'll be even more difficult in other places. So, she said firmly, little Qi will definitely come again. 3,000 worlds, East Border, Burnt City. Meng Qi stood outside the city gate and let out a long sigh. After half a month, they finally arrive. Beside her stood Qin Shomor in black. However, his face was almost darker than his clothes. On the other side of Meng Qi stood white-robed Su Junmo. In front of others, he was the most standard elegant young master in the chaotic world. He was handsome, noble, and elegant. No matter where he stood, he would attract the attention of many women. However, behind others, Meng Qi thought about it and was about to break down. Yes. In her previous life, she had seen how terrifying a talkative fox was. However, she had forgotten that when she met Su Junmo, he was injured and seriously injured. He could not even maintain his human form. He was very weak. Meng Qi, shut up. Shut up. As soon as Su Junmo opened his mouth, Meng Qi and Qin Shomor scolded him in unison. A talkative fox was not scary. A chatterbox is even one major realm higher than you at your peak, and several minor realms. It was very scary if you could not get rid of it no matter what you did. Su Junmo blinked and obediently shut his mouth, feeling wronged. He did not dare to disobey Meng Qi's words. Who knew if this mysterious female Xiao that his master asked him to investigate would become the future demon empress, his other master. Let's enter the city. Meng Qi actually liked peace and quiet, but this time, she led the two of them directly to the largest inn in the center of Burnt City. They went wherever there were the most people. Compared to Fresh Breeze Town, Burnt City was one of the 10 largest cities in the East Border. Just the city alone was dozens of times larger than Fresh Breeze Town. The city was unusually prosperous. From the city gate to the east, people came and went everywhere. It was very lively. Most of the people living in Fresh Breeze Town were ordinary people. Other than the Shouja from Fresh Breeze Valley, it was rare to encounter other Shouja in Fresh Breeze Town. Among the people coming and going in Burnt City, the proportion of Shouja was not small. The shops on the sides of the street, other than the normal restaurants, also sold dan, talismans, Shouja weapons, and Ling energy materials. It was not the first time Meng Qi had come to Burnt City. In her last life, she had only seen the scenery on horseback and had not walked around properly. This time, her state of mind was very different. Walking along the street, she felt many things were very interesting. We've arrived. Meng Qi and the others quickly walked in front of the largest inn in Burnt City, the Ruyi residence. This place was close to the center of Burnt City and was even more prosperous. The Ruyi residence was very large. The front was a restaurant for drinking and eating, and the back was for people to live in. At this time, people were coming and going in the restaurant in front. There were almost no empty seats. In front of so many people, Su Junmo would not talk endlessly. Meng Qi and Qin Shomor finally had a moment of silence. In the past, even if they told him to shut up, he would at most endure for 15 minutes. As long as he could find a reason, He would talk endlessly. "Guests, please come in." The waiter of the Ruyi residence quickly came over. "Are you three having a meal or staying?" "Staying." Mengqi said, "Please give me a quiet room." "All right." The waiter smiled and led Mengqi and the others to the back of the restaurant. "You have come at a bad time. Recently, Burnt City has had many guests from Western Jie. Right now, there is only one independent courtyard that is empty. There are 4 rooms in the courtyard. Do you mind? Please take us to see." Mengqi smiled at him. Qin Xiumor naturally followed behind her. On the way, Mengqi was responsible for all of his food, accommodation, and transportation expenses. In any case, there was no need to worry about debts. For him, the more he owed, the better. The best was the kind that he could not repay in his entire life. The layout of the Ruyi residence was very interesting. In addition to the restaurant in front, after passing through the restaurant, there was a beautiful garden. There were 7 or 8 pavilions in the garden. There was a distance between the pavilions, and there were many vines and flowers planted around them, hiding the pavilions among the green leaves and flowers. Standing outside, it was difficult to see the situation inside. It was elegant and interesting. The waiter saw that Mengqi looked at the pavilions a few more times, and introduced with a warm smile, "This is our restaurant's private room. Outside each pavilion, there is a protective array. Unless a powerful cultivator above the spirit severing stage comes, otherwise, you can't hear the conversation of the guests from outside. It's quite interesting." Mengqi smiled. Su Junmo's eyes lit up. "Please give us a private room, we can eat first, not hungry." Mengqi and Qin Xiumor said in unison again. Su Junmo, he felt wronged, but he still did not dare to contradict the future demon empress. Mengqi took a deep breath. Her temper was really good. During this period of time, she was a little irritable because of Su Junmo. She suddenly felt a little sympathy for Lu Qingran. Mengqi did not believe that after Su Junmo and Lu Qingran became familiar with each other and fell in love, he would still hide his true nature in front of her. It was very impressive that Lu Qingran could endure it and stick to him every day. Thinking of Lu Qingran, Mengqi's eyes flashed slightly. After leaving the main hall of the Cool Breeze Valley that day, she had not seen this senior sister again. When they left the Cool Breeze Valley, it was already very cold and lonely. The sect leader was still there, but the disciples left and went to the Burning Heaven Palace. She did not know if senior sister Lu had returned to the Cool Breeze Valley later. Mengqi followed behind the waiter thoughtfully, following the path paved with stones and passing through the garden. "Brother Su." They had not walked a few steps when flowers swayed in front of one of the pavilions, and a young man in a dark blue robe walked out. "It really is you." When the man saw Su Junmo, he immediately laughed and walked towards Mengqi. "I heard from my sister that Brother Su came to the east border. I was guessing with my friends whether we would meet Brother Su in the east border this time. I didn't expect to meet Brother Su in the burning city so coincidentally." The blue-robed man laughed even more happily. "If my sister knew, she would regret not coming to the burning city with me." Su Junmo smiled slightly. "Brother Xue is joking. These two are." The young man surnamed Xue turned his head to look at Mengqi and Qin Xiumor, and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. The black-robed man was a Jindan cultivator. The other was, a Zhuji cultivator? The young man still had a bright smile on his face. "Brother Su, aren't you going to introduce these 2 fellow Taoists?" Su Junmo glanced at the young man and introduced him first. "This is Xue Chengxian, fellow Daoist Xue." He paused and continued, "He is the first among the younger generation of the Xue family of the Wind Alliance in the west border." "Brother Su, you flatter me." Xue Chengxian smiled slightly. "But as the eldest son, he is indeed the oldest. West border, Wind Alliance, Xue family, Mengqi's cold and indifferent expression changed instantly. Her eyes brightened, and her expression when looking at Xue Chengxian was also different from before. Su Junmo did not know how to describe it, and it was not flattery. It should be similar to sword cultivators going to the Falling Star Pavilion, Dharma cultivators from the east border stepping into the Burning Sky Palace, and he could enter the celestial tree in the demon world. It was the kind of look of joy that one would naturally show when they saw the successor of their own holy land. Su Junmo silently looked at Xue Chengxian. He had stayed in the west border for a long time and was very familiar with the four great families of the Wind Alliance. Xue Chengxian was just being modest. He was extremely talented in cultivation and medical skills. Su Junmo knew that he was extremely outstanding not only in the Xue family, but also in the entire younger generation of the Wind Alliance. This is Meng Qi from the Cool Breeze Valley, and this is Qin Xiumor. Su Junmo introduced the two. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Xue Chengxian politely cupped his hands and greeted them. Qin Xiumor coldly returned the greeting. Fellow Daoist Xue. Meng Qi returned the greeting and looked at Xue Chengxian with bright eyes. Living in the east border, I have long heard of the Wind Alliance. Xue Chengxian smiled slightly. He did not dislike Meng Qi's gaze, although it was bright and clear when looking at him. However, that kind of brightness did not contain any desire, or scheming. It was very clean. Fellow Daoist Meng, are you also a medical cultivator? Xue Chengxian could not help but ask. Yes. Meng Qi nodded. Then if fellow Daoist does not mind, why don't we enter together? Xue Chengxian turned sideways and made an inviting gesture. This time, I was traveling with two fellow disciples and received a notice from our elders. The three of us came to the east border together. Fellow Daoist Xue is also a medical cultivator, so you can verify what you have learned. It can be considered a small spell conference in advance. Elegant, right? Xue Chengxian smiled as he spoke. He was handsome, cultured, and elegant, and came from the Xue family. In addition, he was extremely talented in cultivation and medical skills. He was already a fourth-stage nascent soul cultivator at a young age, and his medical skills had reached 5th grade. Not only was he going to be the next head of the Xue family, there were even rumors that the position of Alliance Master of the Wind Alliance might be his in the future. Therefore, Xue Chengxian had always been very popular with young female cultivators in the west border. Meng Qi nodded. Then I'll have to bother you. Su Junmo, he looked at Meng Qi, and then at Xue Chengxian. After following this girl for more than 10 days, he was not blind. He was naturally smart and sensitive, and he had long seen that Meng Qi did not like to socialize. Along the way, she did not talk much with Qin Xiumor, and she also did not like to talk to him. Now that she was beaming with joy at Xue Chengxian, it was a bit bad. Please. Xue Chengxian turned sideways to make way for the pavilion's entrance. He also cupped his hands at Qin Xiumor. Fellow Daoist Qin, please. Brother Su. He looked at Su Junmo with a smile. These two fellow disciples both know Brother Su. They will be very happy to meet Brother Su here. Please. Su Junmo was helpless. He nodded. After entering the pavilion, he rushed to sit next to Xue Chengxian, separating him from Meng Qi. Sure enough, he also knew the other two people inside. They were also from the Wind Alliance, Murong Fei and Wen He. The Xue family, the Murong family, the Wen family, and the Li family were the four major families of the Wind Alliance. Xue Chengxian introduced Meng Qi and the others to the two of them. Murong Fei and the others already knew Su Junmo, and with Xue Chengxian around, the atmosphere quickly became harmonious. Fellow Daoist Meng, are you also going for the Medical Cultivators Conference? They briefly chatted with Su Junmo about what they had seen and heard recently. Xue Chengxian looked at Meng Qi with a smile. If so, we can travel together later. Medical Cultivators Conference. Meng Qi was not unfamiliar with this. However, after she left the Cool Breeze Valley in her previous life, she traveled the 3,000 worlds and coincidentally met her master, so she did not join any sects. Therefore, she had only heard of this Medical Cultivators Conference. It was a gathering of the top medical cultivators in the 3,000 worlds once every 10 years, but she had never been to it. Yes. Xue Chengxian was slightly surprised, but he quickly explained patiently, this year happens to be the 10-year period. It will be held in Descending Star City at the beginning of next month, and the Descending Star Pavilion will host this Medical Cultivators Conference. Descending Star Pavilion? Meng Qi was extremely surprised. Yes. Xue Chengxian nodded with a smile. However, embarrassment flashed across Mu Rongfei and Wen his faces. No matter how powerful the Descending Star Pavilion was, it was easy to be surprised that a sword cultivator sect would host a medical cultivators conference. When they first heard about it, their expressions were similar to Meng Qi's. But isn't the Descending Star Pavilion a sword cultivator sect? Meng Qi did not understand and asked. It's a sword cultivator sect. Xue Chengxian nodded with a smile. I heard from my father that the new pavilion master of the Descending Star Pavilion promised a 10-year period. Within 10 years, he will do his best to hunt strange beasts and strange birds in the Starfall Sea that can be used as medicine. I see. Meng Qi was suddenly enlightened. No wonder. Most medical cultivators were immersed in the cultivation of medical skills, and their attack techniques were ordinary. The Starfall Sea was said to be the place where the 3,000 worlds, the demon world, and the devil world were connected. There were many strange flowers, strange herbs, and strange beasts. Many of them could be used as medicine, and some of them could even be classified as natural treasures. However, the Starfall Sea was extremely dangerous. Those below the spirit severing stage would die as soon as they stepped into it. Even spirit severing stage cultivators were in danger there. Not to mention hunting those strange beasts, just staying alive was extremely difficult. Those who wanted to hunt and cultivate there were at least insightful Emptiness Realm cultivators. There were not many insightful Emptiness Realm cultivators in the 3,000 worlds. How many of them who had reached the insightful Emptiness Realm would go to the Starfall Sea to collect herbs or hunt strange beasts for them? Even so, I still feel that it's not very appropriate. Mu Rongfei was slightly younger. His dissatisfaction was written all over his face. At this moment, he snorted softly. I'm afraid this will become the biggest black mark in the history of the Medical Cultivators Assembly. Yes. When he also looked unhappy. I don't know what the teachers are thinking. The 3,000 worlds originally valued sword cultivators and spell cultivators more. 300 years ago, the formation became strong again, and the weapon cultivators grew stronger day by day. On the other hand, we feel that we are less and less valued. Now, even the assembly is hosted by sword cultivator sects. I feel that medical cultivators are about to become the vassals of sword cultivators and spell cultivators. Xue Chengxian did not speak. He looked at Meng Qi. What do you think, Daoist Meng? I think it's okay. Meng Qi said seriously. This pavilion master of the Starfall Pavilion is actually willing to go to the Starfall Sea to hunt strange beasts for 10 years and collect herbs for us. I don't think it's a big deal that the Apricot Alliance gave him a special seat. Mu Rongfei and Wen he was stunned. They looked at Meng Qi in surprise. A cultivator who just built his foundation? What the hell? Did she just say the Apricot Alliance? This was an alliance jointly elected by all the major medical cultivator sects. It was responsible for contacting the medical cultivators of the 4 realms. Although the Apricot Alliance was established, it did not interfere with the internal affairs of the medical cultivator sects of the 4 realms. However, if there was an emergency, the Apricot Alliance had the right to conscript all the medical cultivators of the 3,000 worlds. They were also responsible for contacting the major medical cultivator sects. Almost all the members of the Apricot Alliance were the sect masters or elders of the major medical cultivator sects of the 4 realms. Was this girl joking? Ha ha ha. Xue Chengxian clapped his hands and laughed heartily. He lightly knocked on the table and stood up to raise his wine cup. With a smile, he personally filled Meng Qi's wine cup. Daoist Meng's words are interesting. I really should toast you. As Xue Chengxian spoke, he raised the wine cup in front of him and drank the wine in the cup. He smiled at Meng Qi. I'll drink. Daoist Meng, please. The wine of Rui House was sweet and mellow. It was not strong. Meng Qi was not good at drinking. He also raised his head and drank the wine in the cup. Refreshing. Xue Chengxian sat down and turned to look at the surprised Mu Rongfei and Wen he sighed. Both of you are not as clear-headed as Daoist Meng. He said, what we pursue, is the great Tao of medicine or these superficial gains and losses. Mu Rongfei and Wen he was startled. We medical cultivators may be able to enter the Starfall Sea and retreat safely. However, how many of us can kill the strange beasts and ferocious beasts inside? Master can. When he muttered, the others, he shook his head. The two elders should be able to do it too. However, it's hard to say. The Starfall Sea was already a legendary existence for young disciples like them. That's why the #1 sword cultivator in the Eastern Territory is willing to enter the Starfall Sea for us for 10 years. The other party only requested that the Medical Cultivator Conference be held in Starfall City. We are the ones benefiting from this. As Xue Chengxian finished speaking, he looked at Meng Qi with a smile. Daoist Meng, do you think so? Meng Qi nodded his head. Yes. Xue Chengshuan's smile grew wider. If we can exchange a seat in the Apricot Alliance for another 10 years of hunting, he looked at Meng Qi with a smile. We will be making a huge profit. That's right. Meng Qi nodded his head again. She even wanted to say that if she could exchange her position as the Deputy Alliance Leader of the Apricot Alliance for the eternal help of the Pavilion Leader of the Falling Star Pavilion, the medical cultivators in the 3 realms should be overjoyed. That was the Starfall Sea. There were many rare and precious elixirs that only existed in legends. They were heavenly materials and earthly treasures that were only recorded in ancient books. It was even said that some medical cultivators had died in there and left behind jade scrolls that recorded their medical skills. To all the medical cultivators in the 3 realms, this was an immeasurable amount of wealth. Xue Chengxian smiled as he looked at Meng Qi. His gaze was gentler than when he first met Meng Qi. He took the initiative to invite her. Daoist Meng, if you are free, why don't you come with us to the Starfall City? Before the beginning of next month, all the medical cultivators in the 4 realms who can spare time will go. Many sects will also recruit outstanding disciples during the spiritual conference. Meng Qi's heart skipped a beat. She had never participated in such a grand event. Just the thought of medical cultivators from the 3 realms gathering together made her excited. Perhaps, she could find a way to cure little Qi there. All right. Chapter 43. Okay. Xue Chengxian said, Burned City is the closest city to Western Jie. It will take about 7 days to get to Fallen Star City from here. We are going to visit friends here and prepare to depart in 3 days. Does fellow Meng have other plans? His gentle attitude surprised Murong Fei and Wen He, who were watching from the side. Xue Chengxian was indeed the most talented and capable person in the younger generation of the Wind Alliance. They also knew that the elders had high hopes for him and that he was the most likely candidate to become the leader of the Wind Alliance. Murong Fei and Wen He had a good relationship with Xue Chengxian. They grew up together and knew that although he was gentle, had no Dao companion, and was polite to female Xiao, he treated everyone the same and was not close to anyone. Especially when he had a little sister. His family had long wanted to make Wen family's little sister Xue Chengshuan's Dao companion. Xue family and Wen family could be considered in-laws. If they supported each other in the future, it would be good for both families. When the elders of the 2 families mentioned this, Xue Chengxian handled it with a smile. He was gentle and polite to Wen family's little sister as usual. No one could find fault with him and they could see that he did not have any other thoughts about her. It was the first time when he and Murong Fei saw Xue Chengxian take the initiative with a female Xiao. They looked at each other and couldn't help but look at Meng Qi. This Xiaozhe who just entered Juji was not bad looking, but Cool Breeze Valley. The 2 thought about Su Junmo's introduction and tried their best to recall but could not remember which medical Xiao sect was called this. Cool Breeze Valley was too small. Several generations of sect leaders were all Jindan Xiao and it was at the border of Eastern Jie, far away from Western Jie. Murong Fei and Wen He were disciples of large sects and had never heard of such a small sect. They looked at Xue Chengxian in confusion. Was this the young talent that the elders of the Wind Alliance appreciated? The person that so many female Xiao in Western Jie could not move him actually fell in love with this Juji girl at first sight? Xue Chengxian did not look at his 2 friends and patiently waited for Meng Qi's reply. Meng Qi calculated carefully. She came to Burnt City for the jade cicada vine on the cliff outside the city. Once she got it, she could leave. Furthermore, She looked at Su Junmo with satisfaction. Ever since Xue Chengxian appeared, he had been quiet. She definitely had to go to Descending Star City. Along the way, there were medical cultivators from the Wind League chatting. It was much more interesting than listening to the talkative fox talk about the gossip of the demon realm. Meng Qi pondered for a moment. Ignoring Su Junmo's desperate winks, she nodded and said, "Thank you, fellow Daoist Xue. Shall we meet at the city gate in 3 days?" "All right." Xue Chengxian smiled. "Is Daoist Meng busy in the burnt city? Why don't you tell me and see if I can help? Although I haven't been in burnt city for long, I still have a few friends here who can help." "Thank you, fellow Daoist Xue." Meng Qi also smiled at him. "I can handle it myself." Her head became a little dizzy, but her expression was still calm. Looking at the Xue Chengxian in front of her, she felt as if he had become two people. Was it because of the cup of wine just now? Meng Qi had almost never touched wine before. In fact, if a cultivator's realm was higher, it would be difficult for them to get drunk. However, she was only in the foundation stage after all. The wine of Wishing Lane was brewed with more than 10 kinds of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. When it entered the mouth, it was sweet and refreshing, but it had a strong aftertaste. Jindan cultivators who were not good at drinking would easily get drunk after drinking a few cups. Meng Qi subconsciously raised her hand and supported herself on the table. Qin Xiumor was the first to notice her change. He was originally sitting indifferently at the side, ignoring Xue Chengxian and the others. At this time, he suddenly stood up. "Let's go." Meng Qi looked up at him, her eyes becoming hazy. "Go," she shook her head. "Go where?" "Go back and rest," Qin Xiumor said. Oh. Meng Qi nodded obediently, and her fair cheeks were dyed with a layer of red. Qin Xiumor's fingers that were hanging by his side moved slightly. He was used to Meng Qi's serious and calm appearance, but she kept people at arm's length. When he looked at her like this, she had some of the innocence of a young girl. She looked unexpectedly cute. As expected, she was drunk, right? She would not be so obedient when she was sober. Qin Xiumor coughed softly, and reached out to grab her arm to pull Meng Qi up. As expected, the young girl stood up and obediently stood beside him. "It was a long journey, and she can't handle alcohol. I'll take her to rest." Qin Xiumor threw down these words and walked out of the pavilion with Meng Qi. "I'm sorry." Xue Chengxian hurriedly caught up with them and sent them out of the pavilion. He looked at Meng Qi apologetically. "I didn't know that Daoist Meng doesn't drink. I was reckless." Xue Chengxian hurriedly called the waiter who was waiting outside. "Send the two of them to rest. I'll take care of their bills." "Yes." The waiter smiled brightly and led Qin Xiumor to the backyard. "This way, please." Xue Chengxian watched Qin Xiumor and Meng Qi leave before returning to the pavilion. "Brother Su." He laughed bitterly. "I didn't expect Daoist Meng to get drunk after a cup of wine. I was reckless." Su Junmo smiled faintly. "It's okay." He stayed behind because he had questions to ask. Is it true that the pavilion master of the Falling Star Pavilion offered to enter the Falling Star Sea for 10 years in exchange for the Medical Cultivators Conference to be held in Falling Star City? Yes. Xue Chengxian sat down. "My father didn't agree at first. It's fate." He looked at Su Junmo with a smile. "What I used to convince him was what fellow Daoist Meng said just now." He paused and continued, "Medical cultivators like us aren't good at offensive spells. The Falling Star Sea is a priceless treasure land with countless spiritual herbs and spiritual medicines. For thousands of years, many seniors have entered the Falling Star Sea to hunt mutated beasts. Unfortunately," Xue Chengxian sighed softly, "less than 1 out of 10 people can leave unscathed. Those who can leave the Falling Star Sea with the things they want are even rarer. The #1 sword cultivator in the Eastland is willing to enter the Falling Star Sea to hunt for us for 10 years. This is a good thing for the medical cultivators of the 4 realms. Although that's the case, it's still a little embarrassing." Murong Fei snorted. "Isn't he embarrassing us by doing this? So what?" Xue Chengxian turned to look at Murong Fei. His gaze was like lightning as he looked at his good friend. Meng Qi and Qin Shemo were not around. Su Junmo had always been on good terms with them and was very familiar with each other. Xue Chengxian was much more direct. Is face important? Or is the Tao of medical cultivators more important? The seniors have already approved of it. If you still can't see through this, be careful that your Tao heart will be damaged. Mu Rongfei was shocked. Xue Chengxian was the oldest among the three of them. He usually took care of Mu Rongfei, and when the three of them grew up together. Xue Chengxian was like a big brother to them. He knew that Xue Chengxian was not reprimanding him. Instead, Xue Chengxian was warning him. Yes. Mu Rongfei hurriedly sat up straight and respectfully responded. Xue Chengxian smiled slightly. He poured a cup of wine for Su Junmo. Fellow Daoist Meng, you're quite open-minded at such a young age. You can see through this layer in an instant. No wonder Brother Su likes you. You're really interesting and worth befriending. Su Junmo, he held the wine cup but did not drink it. In his mind, he recalled Xue Chengshuan's words. Why did he feel that this guy was implying something? What was fate? What was interesting? Oh my, could it be that he was interested in Meng Qi? Su Junmo immediately became vigilant. Guests, this is it. The waiter led Qin Shemo and Meng Qi into a courtyard. There were 4 rooms inside, and the courtyard was eerie. It looked quiet and elegant. Have a good rest. He could also see that Meng Qi seemed to be drunk. If there's anything you need, just tell me. I'll take my leave first. Qin Shemo took out a second-stage spirit stone from his storage bag and threw it to him. He supported Meng Qi and sent her to the room on the left. The drunk Meng Qi was obedient. When Qin Shemo asked her to sit, she sat on the bed obediently. Can you do it yourself? Qin Shemo poured a cup of tea for Meng Qi and handed it to her. He watched the girl take it and drink it obediently without saying a word. Okay. Meng Qi nodded in a daze. She felt a little lightheaded even though she had not completely lost consciousness. Her surroundings were also a little hazy. She could hear Qin Shemo talking to her. But every word seemed to float very far away. It took a long time for it to reach her ears. I can do it. Meng Qi nodded and repeated. Qin Shemo, he was a little worried. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at Meng Qi, who was nodding her head as she sat on the edge of the bed. Some Xiuzhi did not care about trifles and were less wary of men and women. The other was a 17 or 18-year-old girl and his savior. Qin Shemo stared at Meng Qi for a moment and sighed lightly. He formed a spell with his hand and summoned a small stream of clear spring water. The spring water was icy cold and soaked the soft towel Qin Shemo found. He handed the towel to Meng Qi and said hoarsely, "Wipe your face." Okay. Meng Qi stilled for a moment before taking the wet towel and obediently wiping her face. Qin Shemo looked at her increasingly white face and long, trembling eyelashes. Drunk, her voice seemed to be even softer. Soft and sweet. That young girl who was especially fierce when asking for ling stones didn't seem to be her at all. Wipe your hands. Qin Shemo summoned the clear spring water to wash the soft towel. In his life, no. Even in his last life, he had never done such a thing. If his master saw him using the sect spell to do such a thing, even if he was unharmed, not betrayed by his close friends, and not possessed by his cultivation, the other would angrily expel him from the sect and not recognize him as a disciple. But the obedient little girl in front of him had already taken the soft towel and obediently wiped her hands. Qin Shemo, it was a bit annoying. Such an obedient Meng Qi, he wanted to bully her. You. When he spoke again, his voice was even hoarser. Rest well. Qin Shemo's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He looked at Meng Qi and nodded obediently. Call me if you need anything. He said, I'll be right outside. Finishing, he didn't dare to linger. Probably because of the alcohol, the room was filled with the light medicinal fragrance of Meng Qi. The spirit flower wine mixed with the good fortune seal. Qin Shemo strode to the door and took a deep breath, but he was still unable to drive away the irritation in his body. He didn't turn his head and waved his hand. The door closed, completely isolating him from Meng Qi. The black-clothed youth stomped his feet, His arms crossed in front of his chest, and stood under the eaves outside Meng Qi's door. Xue Chengxian may be a good person. An heir raised in a place like the Wind Alliance would not be so warm to a Xiuzhe who had just entered Juji for no reason. Qin Xiumor exhaled. His gaze became cold and sharp. Meng Qi sat on the edge of the bed for a moment. She was slightly drunk, but a cup of wine was not enough to make her completely drunk. Adding on that she had just used cold water to wipe her face and hands, she was slightly more awake than before. She shook her head and first took out the beast house from her storage bag. Little Qi jumped out. His nose twitched and he suddenly turned to look at Meng Qi. She drank. Meng Qi was already sitting cross-legged on the bed. She held the jade scroll of Sky Beyond in her hand. In the past, she would not be so careless. But today, the alcohol had made her a little slower. She did not even set up a protective array and directly sent her spiritual energy into the jade scroll. A faint light flashed, and Meng Qi's eyes lit up. She was already standing outside the gate of Sky Beyond. She exhaled, and the drunkenness seemed to have followed her to Sky Beyond. Meng Qi shook her head and walked forward. She was going to find some bamboo scrolls that recorded the contents of the medical cultivation spell assembly, and the jade cicada vine. She came to Burnt City for the jade cicada vine. This thing grew on the cliff and was very difficult to pick. The container for the jade cicada vine was also very special. Only a box made of cold jade unique to the Northland could ensure that the jade cicada vine's medicinal properties would not dissipate after leaving the cliff. Meng Qi staggered a few steps forward. She regretted it. If she had known earlier, she would not have finished that cup of wine. Xue Chengxian said that she could do whatever she wanted. It was just that at that time, she felt that Xue Chengxian was not bad. It was rare that other than her teacher, there was someone who could understand her thoughts. She was happy and drank it directly. Now, she regretted it. She was very regretful. Meng Qi simply stopped and stood in place for a moment. She shook her head again. She knew that in her current state, it would be very difficult to find what she needed. Meng Qi looked around and walked towards the nearest teleportation array. She had been here several times and was familiar with the place. She stepped straight into one of the arrays. A light flashed, and when she stepped out of the array again, she had already appeared on the floating island of the Shen auction house. Outside the teleportation array, there were 7 or 8 cultivators guarding there. Ever since that auction, they had been ordered to take turns on duty and had been squatting on the profound floating island for a long time. At this moment, when they saw that someone had arrived, their gazes immediately shot towards Meng Qi. But in reality, they were also slightly confused as they stood guard here. The order from the sect was for them to find the Xiuzhe who had made the Northern Darkness Dan. But who had made the Northern Darkness Dan, whether it was a man or a woman, how old they looked, no one knew. Other than that, they could only keep an eye on Xue Jinwen. Someone had spent a great deal of effort to find out that the Northern Darkness Dan had been sent to the auction by Xue Jinwen. Meng Qi looked strangely at the Xiuzhe on the floating island. She had come here several times. Other than the time she had gone to the Shen auction house, she had never seen so many people here. But she did not take it seriously. Even if she did, she could not understand it now. She walked straight towards the courtyard that Xue Jinwen lived in. When she was about to arrive, Meng Qi found to her shock that there were even more Xiuzhe guarding here. She hesitated slightly, but still pushed open the door and entered Xue Jinwen's little courtyard. The courtyard was still filled with flowers and trees, which looked pleasing to the eye. The door of the hall was wide open. Xue Jinwen, who was dressed in red, supported her forehead with one hand and lazily looked through the bamboo slips in front of her. Sister Xue. Meng Qi reached out and politely knocked on the door 3 times. "En. Little. It's you." Xue Jinwen looked up at Meng Qi, surprise flashing in her beautiful eyes. She smiled sweetly, put down the bamboo slips in her hand, and walked out from behind the desk. Xue Jinwen waved her sleeve, and the outermost courtyard door closed. In this way, even if the Xiuzhe outside had the ability to see through heaven and earth, as long as he could not defeat the master of Sky Beyond Sky, he could not break the array left by the other party. Then, no one outside would be able to spy on anything that happened in the courtyard. "Hey!" Xue Jinwen walked to Meng Qi and pinched her cheek. Did you drink? How did you know, Sister Xue? Meng Qi raised her eyebrows in surprise. After drinking, use the jade slips to come to sky beyond sky, and you'll be even more drunk. Xue Jinwen smiled and explained, the master of this place said that sky beyond sky is not a paradise, but more like a dream. So, if you come here after getting drunk, you'll be even more drunk. What kind of logic is that? Meng Qi muttered. Are you here for something? Xue Jinwen stared at her for a moment, then smiled and asked, have you heard about the Medical Cultivators Conference, Lu Beek? Net En. Meng Qi nodded. She was an itinerant shouja in her previous life, and her master was not a medical shouja. She had only heard of the Medical Cultivators Conference, but had never heard of it. Then do you know that this year's Medical Cultivators Conference will be held in Descending Star City, and it will be hosted by Descending Star Pavilion? Xue Jinwen said slowly. I know. Meng Qi nodded. She reached out to hold the door unsteadily. Come, sit down and talk. Xue Jinwen laughed and pulled her to sit in front of the desk. Descending Star Pavilion is the top sword shouja sect in the East. She sighed. After the news spread, I've heard many medical shouja complain about this matter, and they feel that it's a disgrace to medical shouja. She chuckled. My parents and elders also argued about this for a long time. In the end, it was my elder brother who finally convinced my father and the elders to settle this matter. Oh. Meng Qi nodded. I know. She paused and said, but the master of Descending Star Pavilion promised to stay in the Starfall Sea for 10 years. No matter how you look at it, we're the ones who have the advantage. Xue Jinwen was stunned. A trace of surprise flashed across her beautiful eyes, then she could not help but laugh out loud. If my elder brother sees you, he'll definitely treat you as his confidant. Do you know? He said the same thing to my father back then. Oh. Xue Jinwen imitated Meng Qi's tone. He also thinks that we have the advantage. Meng Qi's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She felt that she should remember something. However, her head was really a little dizzy. The thought flashed across her mind, and she could not grasp anything. She shook her head and found that she was indeed more dizzy than before. Sister Xue. Meng Qi quickly said, I want to find something. Can I trouble you to help me? As she spoke, she quickly added, in addition to the spirit stones paid for these things, I'll also pay Sister Xue spirit stones. Thank you for your help so many times. Call me Sister Xue. You don't have to be so polite with me. Xue Jinwen pinched Meng Qi's face again. She found that the slightly drunk Meng Qi's face was really easy to pinch. Tell me, what are you looking for? The relevant records of the Medical Shouja Conference and the Ice Jade Box. Okay. Xue Jinwen nodded. Come here again tomorrow at this time. Thank you, sister. Meng Qi nodded at her. Okay. Xue Jinwen looked at her drunken appearance and shook her head with a smile. Go back and rest. As she spoke, she helped Meng Qi stand up. How much wine did you drink? Why are you so drunk? 1 cup. Meng Qi shook her head again. Xue Jinwen was right. In this sky beyond heaven, she really felt that she was getting more and more drunk. Meng Qi did not know, and it was not entirely because she was in the sky beyond heaven. The wine she drank had a strong after-effect. The wine that Xue Chengxian and the others wanted was one of the best wine in Rosy Lane. Foundation establishment cultivators once came to Rosy Lane to drink. After 3 cups, they fell to the ground and were drunk for a day and a night. Meng Qi was not a drinker at all. 1 cup was enough to make her drunk. Let's go. I'll send you to the teleportation array. Xue Jinwen shook her head and helped Meng Qi stand up. As she spoke, she helped Meng Qi walk out of the door. The eyes of the cultivators who were staring at her lit up when they saw her and Meng Qi come out. But soon, those people looked away in disappointment. She looked like a very young girl. She did not look like a medical cultivator who could refine such a special Dark North pill. She was probably one of Xue Jinwen's good friends who came to the sky beyond heaven to play with her. Xue Jinwen's lips curled up slightly. So what was the use of these people waiting here? Even if they saw little Qi, they would not recognize her as the person they were looking for. She accompanied Meng Qi to the teleportation array. Meng Qi stood up and said to Xue Jinwen, "Sister Xue, I can do it myself. You should go back." "Okay." Xue Jinwen nodded. She smiled at Meng Qi. Bringing the Dark North pill back to the Xue family also caused a huge uproar. The Xue family in the Westland was the leader of the medical cultivators in the 3000 worlds. But even they had no way of figuring out how the medicinal pills were refined. The elders in the family also wanted to ask Xue Jinwen about little Qi. Only her big brother stood his ground and stopped the elders from asking her. Xue Jinwen knew since she was a child that her big brother would be the future head of the Xue family and possibly the leader of the Wind Alliance. The elders had high hopes for him, and he was indeed talented. He had never disappointed anyone. But sometimes, even her father, who valued her big brother the most, could not understand what her big brother was thinking. But this was good. With such a big brother, the Xue family would not be too unbearable. She could still happily stay at home. Xue Jinwen watched as little Qi stepped into the teleportation array. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she suddenly turned back. "Hey!" She wanted to call out to little Qi, but the teleportation array was activated and the other party disappeared. Xue Jinwen was stunned and quickly walked into the teleportation array. Meng Qi felt that she was right. But when the light flashed and she walked out of the teleportation array again, she found that she had arrived at a place she had never been to before. She looked around and could only see the blue sky and white clouds around her. It seemed to be much higher than the floating island with the Xian family. She looked around and could not see any other floating islands in the sky. Where was this? Her head was getting dizzier and dizzier as she walked forward unsteadily. Before she took a few steps, Meng Qi's legs turned to jelly. She suddenly staggered and fell forward. A man in a white robe who had appeared behind her suddenly stepped forward. A trace of helplessness flashed across his face. In the end, he stretched out his arm and steadily caught Meng Qi's falling body. Chapter 44. Xue Jinwen stepped into the teleportation array that Meng Qi entered. In a flash, she was already standing in front of a tall building with carved beams and painted rafters. The sound of the celestial moon could be heard from inside the building, and the air was filled with a strange fragrance. This was Heavens Beyond Heaven building, located on the second highest floating island in Heavens Beyond. Xue Jinwen looked around but did not see Meng Qi. Strange, she was one step slower than him and entered the same teleportation array almost at the same time. Moreover, little Qi was so drunk that he fell down and could not walk steadily. He should not be able to walk very fast. However, there was no one outside Heavens Beyond Heaven building except for a few servants standing there. Did she see wrongly? Xue Jinwen looked around thoughtfully. She clearly saw Meng Qi step out and step on the edge of the array that led to Heavens Beyond Heaven building. She should have gone to the left, to the teleportation array that led to the city gate. Maybe she really saw wrongly. Xue Jinwen shook her head. She turned around and returned to the island where the Xian auction house was located. Little Qi wanted the records of the medical cultivators' assembly and the cold jade box. These two things were not too difficult. She thought about it and simply left Heavens Beyond and returned to the Xue family. The Xue family was the largest medical cultivator sect in the Westland and one of the 4 major families of the Wind Alliance. Almost all the medical cultivators in the 3000 worlds who had ears knew about this medical cultivator sect that had been passed down for thousands of years. Xue Jinwen came out of her room and walked towards the family's library. The Xue family was one of the 4 major families of the Wind Alliance. It should be said that for the past 500 years, all the leaders of the Wind Alliance came from the Xue family. In addition, Xue Jinwen's elder brother was the most popular candidate for the next leader of the Wind Alliance. Vaguely, the Xue family already had the demeanor of the number 1 family of the Wind Alliance. The family's library was vast. Even Xue Jinwen had never thought that she would be able to read all the books one day. She entered the 12-story wooden building. The stairs spiraled up, and there were no stairs on the top 3 floors. There was also the defensive formation set up by the ancestors of the Xue family, which was activated to protect the library. Third young mistress. The Shui family member who was in charge of guarding the library nodded and greeted Shui Jinwen. His expression was not respectful, but it was still polite. Shui Jinwen returned the greeting and headed to the 4th floor of the library. There were many records of the history of medical cultivation in the 3,000 worlds, ancient stories, and the bamboo slips of famous medical cultivators. She looked along the bookshelves that almost reached the ceiling and finally landed on the innermost row of bookshelves. Medical Cultivation Assembly. Shui Jinwen looked at the words engraved on the bookshelf and thought to herself, this is it. In the heavens beyond heaven, there might be many bamboo slips with records of the medical cultivation spell assembly, but they would not be more complete than the Shui families. Shui Jinwen really liked little Qi. Since this was not a family inheritance that needed to be kept a secret, she decided to return home and make a copy of all the bamboo slips that recorded the medical cultivation assembly for little Qi. Third young mistress. Shui Jinwen was about to take the bamboo slips on the bookshelf when a sweet female voice came from behind her. What are you looking for? Medical cultivation spell assembly? Before Shui Jinwen could answer, the person read out the words engraved on the bookshelf. Third young mistress, do you want to go to this year's medical cultivation spell assembly? Shui Jinwen's raised hand froze and a trace of sadness flashed across her eyes. Her back was still facing the woman who called her third young mistress, and she knew that the woman could not see her expression at this moment. Shui Jinwen closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her lips were already curled into a charming and lazy smile. She turned around and bowed respectfully to the woman standing behind her. Eldest young mistress. Next to the bookshelf was a tall and slender beautiful woman. She was wearing a long yellow dress and her features were picturesque. Her long black hair was tied up in an elegant bun with a few small and round pearls. Based on appearance alone, the woman who Shui Jinwen called eldest young mistress was more beautiful than her. Moreover, she was dignified and elegant, and it was obvious that she came from a prestigious family. This person was Shui Jinwen's eldest young mistress, Shuizichen. She faintly glanced at her third young mistress. Father didn't say that he would take you to the medical cultivation spell assembly this time. She paused and said, Father hopes that you can concentrate on cultivation. I'm 5 years younger than you, and I've already formed my gold core. I'll soon break through the 3rd stage and become a 4th stage medical cultivator. As a member of the Shui family, you can't fall behind others. Do you understand? Yes. Shui Jinwen smiled sweetly. Eldest young mistress, you're right. I'll definitely concentrate on cultivation and live up to father and eldest young mistress expectations. When you reach the 4th stage, I might be able to persuade father to take you to the medical cultivation spell assembly 10 years later. Shuizichen flicked her sleeves. Go ahead. Thank you, eldest young mistress. Shui Jinwen bowed to her and turned to walk out of the library. Shuizichen did not leave immediately. She was still looking at the row of tall bookshelves in front of her. In the library, Shui Jinwen's footsteps gradually faded away, and finally, it became quiet again. Come out. Shuizichen's gaze turned slightly and swept to the side. A smile appeared on her face. How long are you going to hide? Ha ha. A chuckle came from behind a bookshelf not far away. A girl who looked at most 17 or 18 years old walked over quickly. Eldest young mistress. She also called Shuizichen eldest young mistress. She was Shui Jinwen's younger sister, Shuilingfeng. She was also the genius girl who was just praised by Shuizichen. In front of her eldest young mistress, Shuilingfeng was much more relaxed and lively than Shui Jinwen. She hugged Shuizichen's arm and shook it. I knew that third young mistress would want to go, but why doesn't father let her go? You. Shuizichen shook her head and chuckled. Shui family members can't lose face when they go out. Oh. Shuilingfeng nodded. No wonder father doesn't let third young mistress come out every time he meets guests. Father brought me to the medical cultivation spell assembly this time, but he didn't bring third young mistress. So that's why. Let's not talk about her. Shuizichen played down her third young mistress and looked at Shuilingfeng with a smile. Big brother sent news that he met that person in Burnt City. Shuilingfeng was confused. Who did he meet? The person that a certain someone has been thinking about. He asked me about him 3 times in a day. Su Junmo. Xue Lingfeng jumped up happily. Big brother is so annoying. I said that I wanted to go with him, but he didn't let me. Annoying, annoying. As she spoke, she let go of Xuezichen's arm. Eldest young mistress, I'm going to look for big brother. You. Xuezichen's face flashed a trace of amusement. Girls should be more reserved. Why should I be reserved? Xue Lingfeng said righteously. If I like him, I like him. I just want to become Dao companions with Su Junmo. Double. You're crossing the line. Xuezichen shook her head and interrupted the most favored youngest young mistress in the family. She reached out and gently smoothed Xue Lingfeng's hair. Go, I'll talk to father. Okay. Xue Lingfeng turned around and was about to leave. Oh, right. Xuezichen called out to her again. Don't tell your third sister about this. You know, she also. I know. Xue Lingfeng chuckled. She thought for a while and said, but Su Junmo doesn't care about her at all. Before he went to the east, he came to say goodbye to us and didn't even ask third sister about it. What's the point of forcing something that's destined to not belong to you? Third sister's cultivation progress is so slow. Maybe it's because she hasn't resolved the knot in her heart. Lingfeng. Xuezichen frowned. I know, I won't say it in front of third sister. Xue Lingfeng smiled and ran out of the library. Eldest young mistress, I'll leave first. I'll leave father in your care. At this moment, on the highest floating island in the sky beyond heaven, white clouds floated leisurely. Meng Qi only felt that her head was getting dizzier and dizzier. It was as if she was stepping on clouds. She knew that the more she walked, the more unstable she became. Clearly, the ground in front of her was very flat. Every step she took was uneven and uneven. Ooh! Meng Qi took a few more steps and suddenly staggered. Her legs gave way and she fell to the ground. Before she touched the ground, she felt a grip on her waist. A strong arm firmly supported her waist and steadied her body. Thank you. Meng Qi opened her eyes wide and shook her head. She was really dizzy. She wanted to stand up straight, but she couldn't exert any strength. It was as if her hands and feet didn't belong to her anymore. She couldn't control them at all. Was this how it felt to be drunk? Meng Qi even thought that she was hallucinating. Behind her, she heard a soft sigh that was almost inaudible. The sigh was very short and soft, as if it came from a very, very far away place. However, it sounded so familiar. You. She opened her mouth, but before she could say anything else, the world in front of her suddenly turned upside down. The hand that supported her waist just now exerted force. Someone carried her completely powerless body horizontally. The soft robe gently brushed against Meng Qi's cheek. She was completely unable to think, and a blank expression flashed through her mind. This way of carrying her, was it? Meng Qi looked up in a daze. Her gaze fell straight into a pair of brighter eyes. Those eyes were as deep as ink, like the night sky. It was impossible to see through the eyes' owner's thoughts. His eyelashes were very long and thick. But coupled with his handsome long eyebrows and straight nose, he didn't give off a feminine feeling. Meng Qi was in a daze. She stared blankly and almost couldn't believe that the white-robed man in front of her carried her so easily. Her lips trembled slightly, but she couldn't make a sound. The white-robed man didn't speak. He silently carried Meng Qi and walked forward. This was already the highest floating island in the sky beyond heaven. White clouds floated around them. As far as the eye could see, the blue sky was behind them. The magnificent sky beyond Heaven City was under their feet. One floating island after another floated at a lower level. Even the closest sky beyond Heaven Tower seemed to be separated by clouds. The scenery on the island was extremely beautiful. The white-robed man carried Meng Qi easily and walked forward. On both sides of them, there were clear springs and flowers, and there were lush forests and tall bamboos. Not far away, one could even see white clouds pouring down like a waterfall. It was so beautiful that it didn't seem like a mortal world. This was probably the most quiet and peaceful paradise in the sky beyond heaven. Very few people were allowed to enter. But Meng Qi didn't even look at the scenery here. Her eyes were wide open, and she stared at the white-robed man without blinking. Her groggy head made it impossible for her to even clear her thoughts. But even if she was drunk, even if it had been many years, she would never mistake the man in front of her. The white-robed man had already walked into a courtyard with Meng Qi in his arms. There were only 2 rooms in the courtyard, and one of the doors was open. He strode in with Meng Qi in his arms and carefully placed her on the spacious bed in the room. The bed was covered with soft brocade, and there was an ink landscape bed curtain hanging on it. Meng Qi's thin body looked small on the bed, and it was actually somewhat lovable. The white-robed man suddenly raised his hand and rubbed Meng Qi's head. Just like how she always liked to do to him. He quickly withdrew his hand, and he couldn't help but find it funny. Why was he angry with a little girl? Although Meng Qi did do something very excessive to him, she was still a kind girl after all. And she didn't know that he was Meng Qi. The white-robed man called out to Meng Qi in a low voice. His voice was cold and pleasant, and when he deliberately lowered it, it had a faint soothing power. As if he was coaxing Meng Qi, he leaned over slightly, looked into Meng Qi's eyes, and asked softly, "Can you hear me?" Meng Qi was stunned, but she still nodded slowly. As if rewarding her, the white-robed man reached out and rubbed Meng Qi's hair again. This time, he didn't withdraw his hand so quickly, and his slender and dry fingers stayed on her hair for a moment longer. "Meng Qi, tell me," he asked patiently, "who did you learn the art of array formation from?" He watched Meng Qi enter the Outland today and deliberately followed her because of this. For this, he even did not hesitate to activate the teleportation array and send her to the 7th island of the Outland. He also used some tricks to make Meng Qi even more drunk. Otherwise, no matter how good the wine in Rosy Lane was, it would only be a cup. Meng Qi wouldn't be so drunk. The art of array formation. Meng Qi muttered and repeated his words. Her head was really dizzy, and she couldn't react for a long time. What array formation? She looked at the white-robed man's eyes blankly and asked. An array for alchemy, a protective array, and an array that absorbs the spiritual energy of spirit stones for your use. An. The white-robed man's eyes flashed slightly, and it fell on Meng Qi's wrist. The array engraved on the medicine knife. He asked, "Who taught you?" "Who taught me?" Meng Qi still looked confused. She looked at the white-robed man in a daze. The other party had sharp eyebrows and starry eyes, and his appearance didn't look feminine at all. However, that face was really too favored by the heavens, and it was really flawless, perfect, and impeccable. It was really a peerless beauty. Yes. The white-robed man smiled at her. His smile was indifferent, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Who taught you these arrays?" He had to get to the bottom of this problem. Meng Qi was a qi refinement cultivator, even if she had already built her foundation. However, once she made a move, from the fire array for alchemy to the array engraved on the medicine knife, and the protective array. Most importantly, she even knew the star array of the Sky Demon White Tiger clan. The white-robed man was a great expert in the study of arrays, and he was outstanding even among the Sky Demons. He could tell at a glance that Meng Qi had definitely been trained and taught by a famous master. And this master was very likely from the Sky Demon White Tiger clan. The white-robed man's gaze became slightly cold. He wanted to see which clansman would teach such an important formation to a cultivator in the Qi disciple stage. Meng Qi's eyes turned red. She suddenly reached out and grabbed the man's white robe tightly. "Master." Meng Qi's voice choked. However, she didn't cry out loud. Instead, she tightly gripped the robe in her hands, tried her best to raise her upper body, and leaned into the other party's arms. "Master." Meng Qi's thin shoulders trembled slightly. Her voice also trembled violently. "Don't you want me anymore?" "Boo-hoo." A low sob overflowed from her mouth, but she was soon forcefully held back. The white-robed man's entire body stiffened. He didn't understand how things had suddenly turned out like this. He slowly lowered his head stiffly. He could only see the girl's thin and slender shoulders. The other party should be having a hard time holding it in. Her shoulders twitched slightly, but he could barely hear her crying. Occasionally, there would be 1 or 2 sobs coming from her mouth. Mars, the white-robed man became confused. He had never taken in a disciple and had been alone for 1,000 years. He couldn't be more unrestrained. Why would someone suddenly grab him and call him master? You. His body stiffened as he looked at the girl who was clearly crying very sadly but was holding back her sobs. The words were about to come out of his mouth, but he swallowed them back down. You. He raised his hand stiffly and placed it in the air for a long time. Then, he gently placed it on Meng Qi's shoulder. Don't cry. Boo-hoo. Meng Qi didn't listen to him this time. I miss you so much. I've been looking for you for a long time, but I don't know where to find you. She choked with sobs. I can only wait to see you again. Meng Qi raised her head and looked at the white-robed man with red eyes. Her long eyelashes were wet with tears, and there were tear stains on her fair little face. She looked pitiful and cute. The white-robed man had seen many times that she was calm and composed, and even a little sly. This was the first time he had seen Meng Qi like this. It turned out that the appearance of a strong and brave person when she cried was so lovable. He had seen beauties more beautiful than Meng Qi cry, but they wouldn't make him feel like this. The white-robed man almost blamed himself for the accusation in Meng Qi's words. But he suddenly came to his senses and looked at Meng Qi, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She was still looking at him with a pair of tear-stained eyes. Her gaze was clear, and she looked as pitiful as a fawn. I'm not your master, he explained patiently. I've never accepted a disciple, not in the past, and not in the future. As soon as he said that, he regretted it. Meng Qi's mouth flattened. She didn't speak or make a sound, but her tears kept falling down. How could she cry so much? The white-robed man had never had the experience of coaxing someone since he was born. For the first time in his life, he felt helpless. It was a feeling of powerlessness that he had never felt before, even when he was seriously injured. Don't cry. He had forgotten what he was going to do. He also didn't remember that he was going to ask how Meng Qi learned such an important thing as the star formation. He was at a loss for a moment, then reached out and grabbed a brocade pouch from the side. These are all for you. Meng Qi, sob, 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 sob. She still didn't speak, and her tears kept falling. As expected, her master didn't want to acknowledge her. That was true. He had said many, many times that he didn't want her as his disciple. Although he had never really abandoned her, he did say that he wasn't her master. Was it because her cultivation talent was still too poor? When Meng Qi thought of this, she cried even more sadly. She usually wouldn't be like this, but now that she was drunk, she couldn't control her emotions at all. More and more tears fell, and soon, a small tear stain was stained on her clothes. Don't cry. The white-robed man really had never had the experience of coaxing a girl. He was regretting it now, very regretful. Why did he trick Meng Qi to come here? Why did he ask her where she learned the formation? She had learned it, and she didn't do anything outrageous. Instead, she had been using it to save people. That was nothing. These are all for you. As the white-robed man spoke, he tapped his finger lightly and simply opened the brocade bag in his hand. He remembered that Meng Qi liked spirit stones very much. As soon as the storage bag was opened, the sparkling and translucent fluorescence instantly illuminated the entire room. Even Meng Qi was stunned. In the brocade bag was a whole bag of 9th-grade spirit stones. The spirit qi light was dazzling, enough to blind people's eyes. The trichiliocosm used spirit stones as a unit to measure the value of items. Spirit stones were also the common currency of the 4 realms. Including the demon realm and the devil realm, they also accepted spirit stones. Spirit stones were divided into 9 grades. When they were in the Cool Breeze Valley, the disciples only received 10 to 21st grade spirit stones after completing an ordinary sect mission. Later, Meng Qi could make money, and the Dark North pill sold for more than 200 8th grade spirit stones, which was already a lot. That was almost equivalent to the entire Cool Breeze Valley's income for several years, including the sect master and elders. CXZWW. Comet was no exaggeration to say that after selling the Dark North pill, Meng Qi was definitely the richest person in the Cool Breeze Valley. And now, in front of her was a whole bag of innumerable 9th grade spirit stones. 1,000 8th grade spirit stones could only be exchanged for 1 9th grade spirit stone. If a ninth-grade spirit stone was used to buy medicinal herbs, as long as it was not a particularly precious heavenly material or earthly treasure, it could fill up the storage bag that Meng Qi had just exchanged. She stared at the brocade bag in a daze, and her drunken head could not think of anything else. The white-robed man finally breathed a sigh of relief. He reached out and held Meng Qi's hand as if it was scalding and asked her to leave her divine sense mark on the brocade bag. "Okay, don't cry," he said, "these are all yours." Meng Qi, she looked up at the white-robed man, her mouth flattened, and tears fell again. "Master," Meng Qi sobbed and said in a choked voice, "I can also earn spirit stones. Don't leave me behind." She reached out a little pitifully and grabbed the man's robe again, looking up at him. "I don't need Master to raise me anymore. I can really earn a lot of spirit stones. I can raise you." The white-robed man sighed. He shouldn't have let Meng Qi get so drunk. He raised his hand, and his sleeve brushed Meng Qi's face. "I know." The white-robed man was helpless. "You're drunk. Have a good sleep." Meng Qi answered and lay down on the bed softly. The white-robed man finally breathed a sigh of relief. Any investigation and questioning could be put aside for later. A drunk Meng Qi was simply scarier than the strongest opponent he had ever encountered. Chapter 45. On the floating island in the heavens beyond heaven, the white clouds poured down like a waterfall into the lake below. The white-robed man stood tall, his sleeves fluttering in the wind. His hair was tied up with a small black sandalwood crown. When Su Junmo rushed over, the white-robed man had already been waiting for almost half an hour. "Master." He took a deep breath and bowed respectfully. "How is it?" The white-robed man did not turn around. His dark eyes were still looking at the unpredictable waterfall. The pavilion master of the Falling Star Pavilion promised to enter the Starfall Sea for 10 years. Su Junmo told him all the news he had heard. "Oh." The white-robed man's expression did not change. The Falling Star Pavilion? He had heard of the #1 sword cultivator sect in the eastern border. "Yes." Su Junmo said, for this year's Medical Cultivators Conference, the Falling Star Pavilion agreed to hold the conference in Descending Star City. "Continue." The white-robed man still did not turn around. Su Junmo hesitated for a moment, but he still continued, "I have seen Meng Qi from the Cool Breeze Valley. He went to the eastern border because his master asked him to deal with Sai Kongyang and investigate Meng Qi." He was a little nervous and did not notice that the white-robed man's hands had stiffened. Su Junmo paused for a moment, then continued, "She seems to be quite knowledgeable in the study of formations. I have seen the medicine knife that she made herself. The formation engraved on the knife is very similar to..." At this point, he fell silent. He didn't dare to continue. Even in the demon realm, he had only seen this array a few times. The formation was engraved under the celestial tree in the demon realm. Furthermore, it was the weapon in his master's hand, Sunset. "I know about this," the white-robed man said. "I have followed Meng Qi to Burnt City. She should be going to Descending Star City to participate in the Medical Cultivators Conference." Su Junmo continued, "She is very obsessed with medicine. She will definitely not miss this event." Su Junmo hesitated for a moment. He looked at the tall and straight back of the white-robed man in front of him, gritted his teeth, and said, "Meng Qi has a little white tiger with him. It is said that he picked up an injured exotic beast and wanted to raise it as a spiritual pet. Meng Qi dotes on the little white tiger and treats it very well, but..." "I understand. You don't have to worry about this." The white-robed man interrupted Su Junmo, which was a rare occurrence. He flicked his sleeves and asked, "The Shui family has already reached the Burnt City?" "Yes." Su Junmo replied respectfully, "Shui Chengxian is here personally. His father should be heading to Descending Star City at the start of the month. Let the Shui family bring their Shui family sutra. Go to Burnt City beyond heaven. I'll give you the command token to mobilize the third team of the Dark Department. If necessary, you can get them to help you." "Yes." Su Junmo didn't dare to ask any more questions. He bowed and left. He had too many questions in his heart, but he didn't dare to ask. The person who asked him to investigate Meng Qi was his lord, but he didn't seem to care about it now. So, Su Junmo was full of doubts, especially when he mentioned the little white tiger. Although he didn't see his lord's expression, he could clearly feel his awkwardness and stiffness. Could it be? Su Junmo suddenly widened his eyes, then quickly looked down to hide the surprise in his eyes. Could it be that he didn't see wrongly that day? The little white tiger's eyes were really the shadow of the Big Dipper. So what was the relationship between Meng Qi and the little white tiger? He picked it up. How could it be so easy to pick it up? Why couldn't he pick up the little white tiger? The more Su Junmo thought about it, the more he felt that his guess was right. Also, there was the Xue family sutra. Although the name was ordinary, it had always been in the hands of the Xue family's masters. It recorded all the medical skills of the Xue family that had been passed down for thousands of years. Why did his lord ask them to bring it to Descending Star City? Su Junmo felt that the answer was obvious. He didn't dare to continue thinking about it, so he hurriedly walked towards the teleportation portal on the floating island. He wondered if Meng Qi had sobered up. He originally wanted to follow her to see if she was all right, but he didn't expect to receive an urgent summons from his lord. Su Junmo stepped into the teleportation portal and appeared on the Xian floating island in a flash. He quickly walked towards the courtyard where Xue Jinwen lived alone. The girl in red was not in the room, but was sitting on the ground under the bamboo forest in the corner of the courtyard. There was a guqin in front of her, and her slender hands were gently strumming the strings. Hearing the footsteps, Xue Jinwen looked up at the door, and a look of surprise flashed across her eyes. "Fellow Daoist Su." She stood up, and the joy in her eyes disappeared. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, and her smile was as charming as ever. "Xue Jinwen." Su Junmo didn't stand on ceremony with her, and he took out a brocade pouch from his storage bag and passed it to her. "Mark this with your divine sense, remember to go to the heavens beyond to retrieve it." "Thank you." Xue Jinwen clasped her hands and bowed to him. She followed his instructions and marked the brocade pouch. Inside were the items that she had asked Su Junmo to find for her. Although there were only 2 items, she was still very happy that he was willing to take her words to heart. "Oh yes." Su Junmo kept the brocade pouch. "Are you going to the Medical Cultivators Spiritual Conference next month?" Xue Jinwen's eyes dimmed, and she shook her head. "Big Brother has already left for the Burnt City. Father and the family elders will be heading to Descending Star City later." She paused and smiled. "But Big Sister and Little Sister will be going." "TSK." Su Junmo shook his head. Xue Jinwen didn't know why he sighed. She thought for a while and asked, "What's the matter, Daoist Su?" "I've already met your big brother in the Burnt City." Su Junmo didn't hide it from her. "He's with 2 people from the Murong family and the Wen family." "Yes." Xue Jinwen nodded. Many cultivators who were injured by vines suddenly appeared in the Huajiang Manor, which borders the Western and Eastern Kingdoms. The Huajiang Manor sought help from the Wind Alliance, and because the injuries were too strange, Father sent Big Brother to check on them. Su Junmo was an important guest of the Wind Alliance when he was in the Western Kingdom. Moreover, it had already caused quite a stir in the Western Kingdom, so Xue Jinwen didn't have to hide it. Moreover, this heavenly demon cultivator from the demon realm was very knowledgeable and had helped the Wind Alliance and the Xue family a lot. She didn't know how Big Brother was doing, and Su Junmo might be able to help. Su Junmo was stunned. "Injured by vines?" "Yes." Xue Jinwen nodded. "Your big brother didn't mention this." Su Junmo's brows furrowed slightly. "I should go." He turned and walked out of the courtyard. Xue Jinwen looked at his retreating figure, and her gaze gradually became determined. She turned and put away the guqin that was placed at the side. Then she closed the door and walked towards the transportation formation. When Meng Qi woke up, her head still hurt. She opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling, and didn't realize where she was for a long time. The furnishings in the room gradually became clear, and the things that happened before she fell asleep slowly returned to her mind. Burnt City, Are you Yi Lane, Shui Chengxian? Then there was that cup of sweet and delicious wine that was obviously very strong. Meng Qi sat up in frustration and hit her head. Did she really pass out with just one cup? She didn't drink much, but she was a foundational cultivator. Meng Qi narrowed her eyes slightly. There seemed to be sorrow's flower, hibiscus tooth, snowfox orchid, and other spiritual flowers in the wine. She didn't pay much attention when she drank it, but now that she thought about it, there should be more than 10 kinds of spiritual flowers in that cup of wine. No wonder she couldn't resist it at all. She didn't know if she did anything strange when she was drunk. Meng Qi shook her head. She remembered that Shui Chengxian said something about the medical cultivation assembly, but after that, she became a little confused. Why excess? Few fragments occasionally flashed through her mind. She seemed to have gone to the heavens beyond heaven. Meng Qi looked down blankly and looked at the heavens beyond heaven jade scroll that she held tightly in her palm. Did she go to see Sister Shui Jinwen? And then? She blinked her eyes. What else happened? Meng Qi. Meng Qi was a little lost in thought when there were 3 knocks on the door. Qin Shumo's voice came from outside. Are you awake? Yes. Meng Qi opened her mouth and found that her voice was a little hoarse. Not only that, but her eyelids also hurt a little. I'm coming in. Qin Shumo asked again. Wait a moment. Meng Qi took a deep breath and jumped off the bed. There was a dressing table in the room with a mirror embedded in it. Meng Qi walked over quickly and looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was a little messy, but it was okay. Why were her eyes swollen? She leaned closer and found that her eyelids were clearly red and swollen. Did she cry? No wonder her eyelids hurt. Not only was she drunk, but she also cried. She was a little embarrassed. Why did she cry when she was drunk? She couldn't remember how long it had been since she cried. Just then, a rustling sound came from behind Meng Qi. She turned around and met the little white tiger's blue eyes. Ah! Little Qi, good morning. Although she knew that she shouldn't have lost her composure in front of little Qi, she still greeted the little white tiger awkwardly. The little white tiger lay down lazily and turned its head to the side. Meng Qi. Qin Shumo's voice came again. Are you done? Right away. Meng Qi cast a spell and washed her appearance simply. She took out a small bottle from her storage bag and poured out some powder to gently rub on her swollen eyelids. The cool feeling instantly replaced some of the pain. When she looked in the mirror again, she was back to normal. Please come in. Meng Qi put away the porcelain bottle and turned to open the door for Qin Shumo. The young man in black stood at the door. When the door opened, his gaze landed directly on Meng Qi's face. Are you awake? He asked. Meng Qi. He saw through it but didn't say it out loud. Qin Shumo's lips curled up quickly. He looked at the slender and elegant girl in front of him who was a little embarrassed. Are you still going to look for the jade cicada vine? Yes. Yes. Meng Qi suddenly remembered. Yes, she did go to the heavens beyond heaven to look for the cold jade box to store the jade cicada vine. Wait a moment. Meng Qi quickly said, I still need to take something. As she spoke, she closed the door again and entered the heavens beyond heaven with the jade slip in her hand. The door of Shui Jinwen's courtyard was tightly shut. Meng Qi was about to contact the other party through her nameplate when Xiong Linmo quickly walked towards her. Fellow Daoist, are you here to look for third young lady Shui? Fellow Daoist Xiong. Meng Qi nodded at him. She said she had something urgent and wouldn't come to the heavens beyond heaven for a few days. Before she left, she told me to give you these if you came to look for her. Xiong Linmo took out a brocade pouch and handed it to Meng Qi. Thank you. Meng Qi made a divine sense mark on the brocade pouch. Third young lady Shui said you would get it by tomorrow at the latest. Xiong Linmo smiled at Meng Qi. I hope it won't delay your business. He paused and asked again, have you heard about the Medical Cultivators Dharma Conference? I wonder if fellow Daoist will be there. Yes. Meng Qi said. That's great. Xiong Linmo immediately smiled and cupped his hands at Meng Qi. I heard that the top medical cultivation sects in the 4 realms will attend this Medical Cultivators Dharma Conference. The once-in-a-decade medical cultivators competition will also be held as scheduled. Xiong Linmo was a little embarrassed. I'll try to participate. Third young lady Shui and fellow Daoist don't need to, but if we meet in Descending Star City, I hope we can have a drink together. Meng Qi smiled. Okay. Then it's settled. Xiong Linmo clapped his hands excitedly. When the time comes, invite third young lady Shui and we'll meet in Descending Star City. He cupped his hands at Meng Qi again and turned back to his small courtyard. Meng Qi also quickly turned around and walked toward the teleportation array. So she really came to sky beyond heaven. Why did she feel that something else happened besides asking Sister Shui for help? Meng Qi walked toward the teleportation array in a daze. On the floating island with the Xian word, there were still many cultivators from various sects waiting for the rabbit. Other than that, everything seemed so quiet and nothing unusual. Perhaps he was too drunk to think straight. Meng Qi looked up at the sky. Above the blue sky, the floating islands, each larger than the last, were still quietly floating in the air. At the highest point, the first island that seemed a little special was still floating leisurely on the other side of sky beyond Heaven City, some distance away from the remaining 6 floating islands. It seemed so aloof and independent. Meng Qi shook her head again. She must be drunk. She stepped into the teleportation array. When the light lit up, some messy fragments suddenly flashed in her mind. Cloud waterfall, bamboo, the sky that was very close, and the white-robed man's warm and strong embrace, but those images flashed too quickly. Before Meng Qi could catch anything, they flashed in her mind. She returned to the room in Rosy Lane and looked down at the jade scroll in her hand. Why did she feel that, after she was drunk, she seemed to have dreamed of her master? Yes. And it was a very real master. With a straight face, he refused to admit that he was her disciple's master. Even his tone seemed so real. In any case, he insisted that he was not her master. But he had taught her so much. Meng Qi flipped her hand and kept the jade scroll in her storage bag. Alchemy arrays, cultivation arrays, and all kinds of spells, as long as it was something that he knew, Meng Qi would teach her everything. He also never laughed at her whimsical ideas. Instead, he would ponder with her and try his best to turn her ideas into reality. Meng Qi flipped her hand and kept the jade scroll in her storage bag. She knew why he didn't recognize her as his disciple. It was because her cultivation talent was too poor. And her master was a genius who had the ability to change the world. Of course, he didn't want to accept a disciple who was so stupid that she had to rely on his help to form her gold core. It didn't matter. She would always remember the day she met her master, and she would also remember that place. Before that, she would work very hard to cultivate. She would never embarrass him again. In her previous life, she spent so many spirit stones and natural treasures on her master. In this life, she would pay him back. Meng Qi instantly pulled herself together and opened the door full of energy. Qin Xiumo was still outside the door. He looked at her up and down with a dark face. So mysterious. Yes. Meng Qi glanced at him and answered matter-of-factly. Qin Xiumo owed her so many spirit stones. Now that she was selling herself to pay off the debt, she had no intention of explaining herself to him. Qin Xiumo's face turned even colder. Are you still going? Where are you going? Before Meng Qi could answer, the door of another room in the courtyard suddenly opened. Su Junmo's voice floated out before he came out. It just so happens that I have nothing to do today. This is my first time in Burnt City, so I'll go with you. If you need my help, don't hesitate. I'll help you. Qin Xiumo's face turned even darker. Meng Qi didn't look any better. The two of them looked at each other. It was rare for them to have a tacit understanding on this matter. Hey! Why are you standing in front of Meng Qi's door? By the way, Meng Qi, do you have a headache? I forgot to tell you yesterday that the wine in Rosy Lane has a strong after effect. No, I didn't have time to tell you. You drank it all in one gulp. Su Junmo muttered as he walked towards Meng Qi. He actually had more to say, but he didn't dare to reveal a single word. He could only ramble on about other things. By the way, Shui Chengxian seems to be waiting for Chu Tianfeng. I heard that the young palace master of Burning Sky Palace went into seclusion after returning to Burnt City. He should come out today. Should we also visit him? If Meng Qi has any problems in Burnt City, it should be much easier to ask him for help. Meng Qi, speaking of Burnt City, I suddenly remembered our demon realm. Do you know that the demon realm is divided into 9 heavens? There is also a city called Burnt City in the 3rd heaven. Yes, you guessed right. It's the territory of Sikong Yang's Red Fox clan. In ancient times, our demon realm ancestors once killed the divine devouring vine. The bastards of the Red Fox clan secretly hid the last seed of the divine devouring vine in the heavenly fire prison of Burnt City. The heavenly fire there isolated the spirit Qi and hid it from our ancestors, allowing this evil thing to be preserved. Meng Qi, she turned around and quickly walked out of the courtyard. She had never been so eager to become stronger. At least, she could become stronger than Fox Su and seal his mouth with one move. Qin Xiaomor wasn't any better. He quickly followed Meng Qi with a dark face. But both of them knew that no matter how fast they walked, Su Junmo's figure flashed, and he had already caught up. Speaking of the Red Fox clan, there is a legend in the demon realm. It is said that the Red Fox clan is full of beauties, and the number 1 beauty in the demon realm is often from the Red Fox clan. 9,000 years ago, the patriarch of the Crimson Fox clan was a ravishing beauty. She secretly bred the divine devouring vine. Divine devouring vine? A clear male voice interrupted Su Junmo's endless words. Xue Chengxian was still dressed in a blue robe. He stood elegantly outside the courtyard where Meng Qi and the others lived. He looked at Su Junmo in surprise, then looked at Meng Qi and Qin Xiaomor. Brother Su, did you just say the divine devouring vine? Su Junmo pondered and slowly nodded. Yes. Meng Qi heaved a long sigh of relief. She turned to look at Xue Chengxian. Her impression of this young medical cultivator was even better. I was too reckless. Xue Chengshuan's eyes were filled with unconcealable worry. This time, my 2 junior brothers and I came to Burnt City because of the divine devouring vine. He paused and said, recently, dozens of cultivators were injured by the vines in the Huajiang Manor, which is the closest to the east. Their injuries were not serious, but green vines grew out of their bodies half a month ago. When my 2 junior brothers and I went to check, 8 of them had their spirit Qi sucked dry by the vines and became zombies. Su Junmo's eyes turned cold. Huajiang Manor. Yes. Xue Chengxian nodded. I have never seen such injuries in the 3,000 worlds. I also looked through the ancient records and found the relevant records. I wanted to ask Brother Su yesterday, but Brother Su left because he had urgent matters to attend to. We came to Burnt City to find the young palatial lord of the Burning Sky Palace. It is said that not long ago, he saw the divine devouring vine injuring people with his own eyes. Su Junmo hurriedly looked at Meng Qi and said with a serious expression, "Are you sure it was the divine devouring vine? If the ancient records are correct, the divine devouring vine is correct. I used pills to temporarily suppress the divine devouring vine in the injured people's bodies and rushed to Burnt City to find young palatial Lord Chu." Su Junmo's expression became even more serious. He looked at Meng Qi again. If it were someone else, he might directly say that Meng Qi could save people. However, this was the woman that his master cared about, so he did not dare to do so. Fellow Daoist Xue. Meng Qi took the initiative to ask, how far is Huajiang Manor from here? Xue Chengxian was stunned. Before he could answer, he suddenly heard the sound of wind. Not far away, a young man in black walked toward them with big strides. Brother Xue, Chu Tianfeng had already taken the initiative to greet Xue Chengxian before he reached them. He had just come out of seclusion and completed a small cultivation level. When he heard that Xue Chengxian had personally come to Burnt City to find him, he hurriedly rushed over. In the 3,000 worlds, strength was the most important thing. Although Dharma cultivators and sword cultivators were still respected, the person who had the most hope of becoming the future alliance master of the Wind Alliance would be treated with respect wherever he went. Chu Tianfeng was no exception. When he walked over from Rosy Lane's courtyard, Meng Qi and Qin Xiaomor happened to be standing behind the courtyard wall. Chu Tianfeng was still behind the courtyard door, so he did not see them. He walked directly toward Xue Chengxian. As he walked, he quickly said, I've already heard about what happened in Huajiang Manor. If Brother Xue can really confirm that the person who injured people was the divine devouring vine, don't worry. I know a medical cultivator who can treat the divine devouring vine's injuries. Xue Chengxian was a little surprised, but he still cupped his hands toward Chu Tianfeng. Not only Brother Chu, who is the medical cultivator that you're talking about? I'll personally pay a visit. Chu Tianfeng waved his hand and said, she's not from the Burning Sky Palace. His eyes were bright, and his voice was a little excited. Leave this matter to me. I'll also pay for all the spirit stones needed to treat the person. How can I do that? Xue Chengxian said, as long as Brother Chu can introduce me to this senior, I'll personally go and invite her. The herbs and spirit stones needed should naturally be no. Chu Tianfeng waved his hand repeatedly. I'll pay for all the spirit stones. I'll pay all of them. As he spoke, the corners of his lips curled up. She should also be in the burning city. I've already instructed my disciples to pay attention. As long as she's here, I'll. Chu Tianfeng. Qin Xiumor could not stand it anymore. This guy clearly wanted to owe a bunch of spirit stones and refused to pay them back. He wanted to rely on Meng Qi just like that. Too shameless. He would never allow such a thing to happen. Hey! Chu Tianfeng suddenly turned around, his eyes instantly brightening. Meng Qi. He did not even look at Qin Xiumor as he strode toward Meng Qi. You've already arrived in the burning city. When did you arrive? Oh, right. Chu Tianfeng remembered the important matter and hurriedly turned to look at Xue Chengxian. Let me introduce you. Meng Qi, this is Xue Chengxian, Brother Xue from the West Kingdom, Wind Alliance. He paused and said, Brother Xue, this is Meng Qi. Chu Tianfeng did not mention anything about the Cool Breeze Valley. She's the medical cultivator I mentioned just now, the one who can treat the divine devouring vine. Not only Xue Chengxian, but Murong Fei, and when he also looked at Meng Qi in surprise. Foundation Establishment Cultivator? Was Chu Tianfeng sure he was not joking? Su Junmo thought for a while and said, I can testify that she can save them. Chapter 46. For a moment, even Xue Chengxian did not speak. He looked at Meng Qi. He did not expect that the girl he found interesting yesterday was the person he came to Burnt City to find. But this Foundation Establishment cultivator, Xue Chengshuan's expression was not as obvious as Murong Fei's and when his. He bowed to Meng Qi and said with a smile, Fellow Daoist Meng Qi is so kind. I admire you. Fellow Daoist Xue, you flatter me. Meng Qi returned the bow. How did you treat the divine devouring vine's injury? Chu Tianfeng was the one who said that Meng Qi could treat the divine devouring vine's injury. Su Junmo was the one who testified for her. Xue Chengxian absolutely trusted these two people. He did not doubt the authenticity of the matter at all and politely did not ask how Meng Qi, a Foundation Establishment cultivator, did it. Brother Xue. Su Junmo's heart suddenly moved. Although I'm not a medical cultivator, I know the rules of communication between medical cultivators. Yes. Xue Chengxian nodded with a smile and admitted straightforwardly, I forgot and broke the rules. The most confused one was Meng Qi. She was an orthodox medical cultivator, but after leaving Cool Breeze Valley in her previous life, she did not join any other sect. After that, she followed her master most of the time. Her master was very powerful and had always been carefree and unrestrained. Not to mention the various rules of medical cultivators, he had never asked Meng Qi to follow the rules that should be followed between master and disciple. Of course, it was also because she had never really agreed to acknowledge Meng Qi as her disciple. Xue Chengxian pondered for a moment. Fellow Daoist, you can treat the divine devouring vine's injury. Even in the Trichilia chasm, your knowledge is extensive. I think you don't lack cultivation technique books. He paused and looked up at Meng Qi. Meng Qi had lived for 2 lifetimes. In front of this successor groomed by the Wind Alliance, She could not hide her thoughts. Xue Chengxian could tell at a glance that this girl probably did not know about the rules that Su Junmo mentioned. He did not intend to take advantage of Meng Qi in this matter. Instead, he smiled and explained calmly, 2,000 years ago, the demon realms suddenly invaded through the Starfall Sea. In a short period of time, the 3,000 worlds were plunged into misery and suffering, and countless practitioners died. Fellow Daoist, I'm sure you still remember that when the catastrophe happened, countless sects were destroyed overnight. Medical cultivators, in particular, had lower self-preservation abilities than Dharma cultivators and sword cultivators. Later on, although the devil realm was driven away by us, there were still countless magic arts and pill formulas that were lost. The great path of medical cultivation had regressed by at least 1,000 years. Meng Qi nodded. Of course she knew about it. In the entire 3,000 worlds, there was no one who did not know what had happened 2,000 years ago. It was said that back then, the sun and moon were almost dyed red by the blood of the cultivators. The few sects closest to the Starfall Sea were wiped out overnight, and even their inheritances disappeared from the 3,000 worlds. The losses were so heavy that even now, many practitioners would sigh when they mentioned it. Not only Meng Qi, but even Chu Tianfeng and Qin Shimo's expressions became gloomy. They came from large sects that had a history of thousands or even tens of thousands of years. What happened back then was recorded in the history books of their respective sects. Later, the 4 realms of the 3,000 worlds joined forces, and even the demon realm sent sky demons into the 3,000 worlds to help. The devil realm was utterly defeated and almost completely wiped out. They had indeed won, but the sect had also lost countless powerful elders during the demonic realm's invasion. The dead would never come back, and the destroyed sects disappeared in the long river of history. Those inheritances were also broken. Xue Chengxian sighed softly and continued, not long after we drove away the invaders of the devil realm, the medical cultivation sects of the 4 realms came forward and formed an alliance. They set the rules and held a medical cultivation conference once every 10 years. In order to prevent such a thing from happening again, they wanted to use the medical cultivation conference to promote communication between medical cultivators and the sects. Even if such a thing happens again, some inheritances, cultivation techniques, and pill formulas will not be lost just like that. Meng Qi nodded heavily. The seniors are kind and farsighted. It's admirable. She had never been to a medical cultivation conference before and had very little interaction with the orthodox medical cultivators of the 3,000 worlds. No one in the Cool Breeze Valley had ever taught her this. In her previous life, after Meng Qi saved Chu Tianfeng, she was quickly wrongly imprisoned and did not have the chance to interact with Elder Yang. Thus, when she was preparing to leave the Cool Breeze Valley, Elder Yang would give her all the records of his medical travels. Although it was in exchange for the method to treat the injuries of the divine devouring vine, Meng Qi knew that he was just looking for an excuse. She thought for a while and took out a bamboo scroll from her storage bag. Soft light quickly enveloped it, and she quickly wrote down the method to treat the injuries of the divine devouring vine. The divine devouring vine is actually not difficult to treat. Meng Qi gradually placed the scroll in Xue Chengshuan's hands and said generously, "Fellow Daoist Xue comes from a prestigious sect, and his cultivation level and knowledge are far better than mine. He only needs to spend some time to find a treatment method. It's just that the injured cultivators can't wait." Xue Chengxian was a little moved. He looked at the bamboo scroll in his hands in a daze and then looked up at Meng Qi. The girl's eyes were bright, and she looked elegant. He recalled what she had said yesterday. That kind of open-minded and calm appearance really seemed like someone who would do such a thing. Fellow Daoist Meng. Xue Chengxian did not know whether to laugh or cry. I'm not. He really did not intend to use such a method to move Meng Qi and make her take the initiative to give the method to treat the injuries of the divine devouring vine. Xue Chengxian sighed softly and continued. After the medical cultivators' Dharma conference was established, we set the rules. When medical cultivators exchange cultivation techniques and treatment methods, regardless of whether it's between sects or individuals, the party that initiates the exchange must use a cultivation technique of double the value of the exchange. Also, the other party cannot be forced to make the exchange. After he finished speaking, He took out 2 bamboo scrolls from his storage bag and handed them to Meng Qi with both hands. "Fellow Daoist Meng, you're so kind. I can't break the medical cultivator's Dharma conference's rules. These are the Silver Moon Sword diagram and the 9 Yang Restoration Pills pill formulas." Xue Chengxian looked at Meng Qi and said, "Although the Silver Moon Sword diagram is a sword technique, it's very suitable for the medicine knives we use. The 9 Yang Restoration Pills formula is modified from the Yang Restoration Pills foundation, and its medicinal effects are stronger. I'll use it to exchange for the method to treat the injuries of the divine devouring vine. If fellow Daoist Meng is not satisfied, you can also exchange for something else." Big brother Xue, Murong Fei and Wen, his expressions changed when they heard the words 9 Yang Restoration Pill and Silver Moon Sword diagram. The two of them called out Xue Chengxian at the same time, wanting to dissuade him. These 2 items did not belong to the Wind Alliance or the Xue family. The Silver Moon Sword diagram was the sword technique that Xue Chengxian practiced. When he went out to train in his early years, he coincidentally discovered it when he was picking herbs in a deep valley. It was unknown which senior had left it behind, but it seemed to be tailor-made for the medicine knives used by medical cultivators. Xue Chengxian relied on the Silver Moon Sword diagram. Over the years, not only medical cultivators, but many sword cultivators had also sought him for guidance. In the end, they were all defeated by him. He gave it away just like that. They had only met this Meng Qi yesterday. Furthermore, he was really a foundation establishment cultivator. They did not know if the method to treat the divine devouring vine would work. As for the 9 Yang Restoration Pill, it was also an improved formula that Xue Chengxian had based on the Xue family's Yang Restoration Pill. According to the Wind Alliance's rules, the person who improved the formula had the rights to the pill formula. He could give it to the sect in exchange for sect contribution points. In addition, all sect disciples who wanted to learn this pill formula in the future had to spend a certain amount of sect contribution points to exchange for the pill formula. 80% of the sect contribution points that these disciples spent would go to the person who improved the pill formula. In a large sect like the Wind Alliance, sect contribution points could be used to do many things. Some rare treasures of heaven and earth, as well as precious magic arts and pill recipes, could be exchanged with sect contribution points. In Murong Fei and Wen his eyes, although the 9 Yang Restoration Pill formula was precious, it was not as valuable as the Silver Moon Sword diagram. Xue Chengxian had not given the Silver Moon Sword diagram to the sect yet, and none of the Wind Alliance disciples had learned it. Now, he was actually going to give it to this foundation establishment cultivator that he had only known for a day. How could they not be shocked? Meng Qi looked up at Murong Fei and Wen he before looking at the bamboo scroll in Xue Chengshuan's hand. "It's too precious." She reached out and picked up the bamboo scroll with the 9 Yang Restoration Pill formula. "One is enough." Her cultivation talent was very ordinary. No matter how hard she tried to learn offensive spells and sword techniques, her progress was slow. Seeing Murong Fei and the others' nervous expressions, and the Silver Moon Sword diagram sounded very powerful, she should not waste it. Fellow Daoist Meng, Xue Chengxian smiled bitterly. As the eldest son of the Wind Alliance's Xue family, the rules of the Medical Cultivation Conference cannot be broken. He reached out and covered his left hand with his sleeve, holding Meng Qi's hand through the sleeve. "I hope fellow Daoist Meng can help," Xue Chengxian said as he put the 2 bamboo scrolls in her hand. When he held Meng Qi's hand, Qin Xiumo, Chu Tianfeng, and even Su Junmo stepped forward at the same time. The 3 of them stared at Xue Chengshuan's hand with burning eyes. In an instant, Qin Xiumo's life-bond sword floated in the air and made a clang sound. Su Junmo hesitated. Wasn't Xue Chengxian a gentleman? What did he want to do? Was he going to make a move on the future demon empress in front of him? Should I just kill him? Chu Tianfeng's expression changed. His eyes moved quickly between Meng Qi's face and Xue Chengshuan's hand. His right index finger and thumb were already clasped, ready to attack at any time. However, before they could move, Xue Chengxian had already let go of Meng Qi's hand and retreated a few steps. He held the bamboo scrolls that Meng Qi gave him and quickly skimmed through the contents. His eyes flashed slightly. "Huh! Murong Fei, and when he looked at Meng Qi vigilantly, they were waiting for Xue Chengxian to show a trace of suspicion, then they could immediately control this little foundation building cultivator. What a clever idea! Xue Chengxian opened his eyes in surprise. This fellow Daoist Meng is not only kind, but also intelligent. I really admire you. Even Zhuji Xiuzhe could use this kind of method. The heartbreaking spell is a bit troublesome. However, there are other ways to hunt the 5 elements green crane and make the 5 elements spiritual power in its blood immortal. Meng Qi was also curious. What is it? Use the Mahayana illusion spell. Xue Chengxian was just about to take the bamboo scrolls when he suddenly remembered and said guiltily, I'm sorry, fellow Daoist Meng. This is the spell of the Wind Alliance. I can't give it to people casually. He explained, once the Mahayana illusion spell reaches the realm, it can keep the spiritual power in the strange beast's body immortal. It's very useful. Besides, Xue Chengxian thought for a moment. Foundation building cultivators can refine the Mahayana illusion powder, which has a similar effect. However, this is also the recipe of the Wind Alliance. I can't give it to fellow Daoist Meng. I see. Meng Qi was not interested in the silver moon sword diagram that Murong Fei and the others were so nervous about. Now that she heard the name of the Mahayana illusion powder, her face was full of yearning. Yes. Xue Chengxian said, we're going to Hua Jiang Mansion now. If fellow Daoist Meng has nothing to do, why don't we go together? On the way, we can also discuss how to treat the injuries of the divine devouring vines. It's not convenient for me to reveal the sect's pill recipes, but I can make some decisions. If fellow Daoist Meng wants to know, I'll definitely tell you everything I know. Okay. Qin Xiaomo and Chu Tianfeng did not have time to stop him. Meng Qi had already nodded happily. Xue Chengxian took out a wooden boat from his storage bag and threw it out casually. The small boat seemed to expand with the wind and instantly became a tall boat that could carry dozens of people. Fellow Daoist Meng, please. Xue Chengxian waved his hand and invited Meng Qi to board the boat first. Then, it was Su Junmo, Chu Tianfeng, and Qin Xiaomo. Xue Chengxian was the last to board the boat. With a light flick of his finger, more than 10 fourth-grade spirit stones flew to the bottom of the boat. The spirit stones flickered, and the boat soared into the sky and flew toward Hua Jiang Mansion in the distance. Fellow Daoist Meng, you added the 5-element green crane blood. Let me see. Silk twining fruit, Tianluo crystal. It's indeed ingenious. Xue Chengxian and Meng Qi stood side by side on the deck of the boat. Xue Chengxian was still holding the bamboo scroll. As he read, he sighed softly. I've only seen records of the divine devouring vine in books. I think I've seen many records related to it. If I were to think of a treatment method in a hurry, I'm afraid it wouldn't be so perfect. Su Junmo, once he boarded the boat, he stubbornly went to Meng Qi's side to supervise the two of them on behalf of his master. He had known Xue Chengxian for a long time. This eldest son of the Xue family was not only talented and intelligent, but he was also diligent and hardworking. He had always been popular with female cultivators. There were also many noble ladies around him and female cultivators of equal social status. Su Junmo had never seen anyone praise someone like Xue Chengxian. This person wanted to poach him, absolutely. Su Junmo felt uncomfortable and turned to look at the other two. Qin Xiaomo and Chu Tianfeng stood not far away with cold expressions. However, for some reason, no matter how angry their faces were, they did not step forward to stop Meng Qi and Xue Chengxian from talking. What's wrong with these two? Su Junmo did not understand. He had seen Qin Xiaomo shamelessly following Meng Qi along the way. Chu Tianfeng was the same. He had thought that they both liked Meng Qi. Now that things were like this, wouldn't they be jealous, crazy, and stop them? Speaking of the silk-twined fruit, Xue Chengxian had already changed the topic. Silk-twined fruits under 100 years old are more common. After 100 years, the silk-twined vines parasitized on the fruit will change. The medicinal properties will interact, and the medicinal effects will increase by more than 3 times. Meng Qi's eyes widened. This was something that she had never seen written about in books. Xue Chengxian touched his storage bag and took out a small wooden box. He opened the wooden box, and there happened to be a silk-twined fruit that was more than 100 years old inside. The silk-twined vines grew green leaves again, and blue rice-like flowers bloomed on them. The whole fruit looked very cute. As soon as the box was opened, a strange fragrance assailed their nostrils. Everyone on the ship could not help but take a deep breath. They only felt relaxed and happy. Murong Fei, the Wind Alliance has 100 herb gardens. Xue Chengshuan's voice was gentle and pleasant. They specialize in cultivating these strange flowers and herbs. Some of them even have a lifespan of 1,000 years. Even in the outland, they may be difficult to find. That's great. Meng Qi looked at the 100-year-old silk-twined fruit, and her eyes lit up. Xue Chengxian smiled slightly. He slowly put away the silk-twined fruit and continued, the Wind Alliance's library should be the largest library among the medical cultivation sects in the Trichiliocosm. Before I went out to train for the first time, I stayed there for 9 months, forgetting to eat and sleep to read the bamboo slips. Unfortunately, Bidage. He shook his head and sighed. I didn't even finish reading the first floor of the library. Meng Qi, she wanted to go. She really wanted to go. Xue Chengxian continued, the Mahayana illusionary formula and Mahayana illusionary powder that I just mentioned can be found in the library. He was taller than Meng Qi, so Meng Qi could only look up to see him. She looked up at him like this, her eyes sparkling with yearning and longing. Xue Chengxian had seen the admiring gazes of female cultivators, but the longing gaze of this little foundation establishment cultivator in front of him was not directed at him. He shook his head in amusement and sighed softly. Unfortunately, the sect rules are strict, and only disciples of the sect can enter the library. As Xue Chengxian spoke, he turned to look out of the ship's railing. The blue sky was very close, and the white clouds brushed past them. The wind blew his robe, but with the protective array of the ship, it did not make people feel uncomfortable. According to the rules, in this medical cultivation conference, the major medical cultivation sects in the 4 realms will select some talented cultivators from the competition and accept them into their sects. Xue Chengxian turned to look at Meng Qi and asked softly, fellow Daoist Meng, will your sect also come? Meng Qi shook her head. I don't have a sect. She was not the kind of person who would look back. Since she had made up her mind to leave Cool Breeze Valley, she had nothing to do with it. Xue Chengshuan's eyes lit up. In fact, from the moment Meng Qi did not know the rules of the medical cultivation conference, he suspected that she did not come from a large sect. He did not expect that she did not even have a sect. Then fellow Daoist Meng's master, I also don't have a master. Meng Qi shook her head again. She had not found a master yet, and the other party had not agreed to accept her as a disciple. Meng Qi could not be thick-skinned and claim to be the other party's disciple. Cough cough. Xue Chengxian wanted to praise the Wind Alliance again so that Meng Qi could take the initiative to ask to join the Wind Alliance. He swallowed his words before he could say them. This girl was open-minded, and the way she looked at problems was different from ordinary people. He did not want to overreach himself. Fellow Daoist Meng. Xue Chengxian cupped his hands. As the eldest son of the Wind Alliance's Xue family, I invite you to participate in the Medical Cultivation Conference. Would you be willing to join? Sure. Meng Qi nodded. I'll try. Brother Xue. Murong Fei finally could not help but say, but she has just built her foundation. The registration requirement for the Medical Cultivation Conference is to at least complete the foundation, right? It's okay. Xue Chengxian took out a jade pendant from his storage bag. The Xue family has an extra quota every year. Bring this jade pendant to sign up. No one will make things difficult for you. Okay. Meng Qi took the jade pendant. The small jade pendant was exquisitely carved and felt warm to the touch. It was obviously not an ordinary item. Thank you. Meng Qi bowed to Xue Chengxian. I will definitely sign up when I reach Descending Star City. Okay. Xue Chengxian smiled and nodded. I will wait for Daoist Meng's good news. The boat was extremely fast, much faster than the small paper crane that she used to fly. Meng Qi and Xue Chengxian chatted and felt that time flew by quickly. In less than half a day, the boat landed and stopped outside the city gates of Huajiang Prefecture. "We're here." The group disembarked and Xue Chengxian kept the boat. Meng Qi looked up at the wide and tall city gates of Huajiang Prefecture. This place was much bigger than Qingfeng Town. Although it was not as big as Burnt City, it was still a big city. In addition, it was located at the border between the east and the west, so there were many cultivators coming and going. Meng Qi had been here several times in her previous life. In her memory, Huajiang Prefecture was always very prosperous. However, it looked especially bleak today. When they arrived, it was already dusk. The sunset glow burned brightly on the horizon, making the empty city gates of Huajiang Prefecture look even more desolate. The sunset glow covered the streets that were paved with large bluestones. The shops on both sides were closed. Meng Qi and the others walked along the main road in the city for a long time, but they did not meet anyone. They also did not see a single shop that was open. TSK. Chu Tianfeng was in Burnt City, so he came to Huajiang Prefecture more often than Meng Qi. He looked around and said, "I came here 3 months ago. At that time, it was very lively. Don't they care about the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa?" The Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa he mentioned was beside Huajiang Prefecture. The 3,000 worlds tacitly agreed that the sects beside the cities would also protect the safety of the cities. The Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa's sect master and elders were all injured last month. They are all in seclusion to heal their injuries and have not come out yet. Their disciples are killing the demon cultivators who invaded with the divine devouring vines, but the demon cultivators appear and disappear unpredictably. The Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa's ordinary disciples really can't do anything to them. They have already sent out a request for help. Soon, the nearby sects will come to help, when he explained. Chu Tianfeng nodded. When something happened in the West World, they usually would not ask the sects in the East World for help. Therefore, the Burning Sky Palace did not receive the request for help from the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa. Otherwise, he would have known what happened here long ago. "Where are the injured people?" Meng Qi asked. "Follow me." Xue Chengxian took the lead and led everyone to the center of the city. The Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa's courtyard was there. The cultivators who were injured by the divine devouring vines were temporarily settled there. Meng Qi and the others walked to the entrance of the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa's courtyard. When the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa disciples guarding outside saw Xue Chengxian, they hurriedly greeted him. "You are finally back." The 2 disciples bowed to him. When they raised their heads, they could not hide the excitement on their faces. Eldest senior brother also said that if you did not come back tonight, he would send people to Burnt City to look for you. Did something happen? Xue Chengxian made an inviting gesture to Meng Qi. He asked the 2 disciples as he walked into the courtyard. This morning, 2 cultivators passed by Huajiang Manor. After seeing the injured people, she said that she could treat them. Moreover, she could indeed recognize that the ones who injured them were divine devouring vines. She also described the symptoms of the injuries correctly. However, she is only at the foundation establishment stage. Eldest senior brother did not dare to believe her so easily. Therefore, he wanted to ask you to come back as soon as possible. Xue Chengxian was stunned. He turned to look at Meng Qi, another foundation establishment cultivator who could treat the injuries of the divine devouring vines. Qin Xiumo and Chu Tianfeng also looked at each other and saw the familiar confusion in each other's eyes. Is the person who said that she could treat them a young female cultivator? Qin Xiumo suddenly asked lazily. Yes. The Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa disciple turned around in surprise. He looked at the unfamiliar man in black that none of them knew. The other party was very handsome, but he looked a little fierce. That disciple hesitated for a while and nodded. She is a very young female cultivator, about 20 years old. She is very beautiful. Qin Xiumo sneered and raised his chin at Meng Qi. Your senior sister seems to be here to steal your business again. Chapter 47. Meng Qi glanced at Qin Xiumor. Xue Chengxian was a little surprised, but he didn't say anything. He just smiled and said, "The last time I came to the East Border was 3 years ago with my father. It seems that the medical skills in the East Border have progressed very quickly in the past few years. I'll go in and take a look first." He nodded politely at Meng Qi, then turned to the 2 disciples of Xian Yun Villa and said, "Please take me there." "Yes." One of them hurriedly led Xue Chengxian to the door. The other disciple recognized Murong Fei and went and brought them to the main hall of the bee garden. "You've come a long way. Please rest here for a while. I'll have someone bring you tea and snacks." He turned and left in a hurry. Meng Qi casually found a chair and sat down. Chu Tianfeng took a step forward and sat next to her. Qin Xiumor didn't sit and stood next to Meng Qi. "Hey." Chu Tianfeng looked up at him. "You just said that someone is trying to steal business. Is it Lu Qingran? What else could it be?" Qin Xiumor raised the corners of his lips and smiled sarcastically. "She wouldn't go that far, right?" Chu Tianfeng didn't believe it. The disciples of Cool Breeze Valley were so miserable before. Would she dare to do it again? She wouldn't dare to do it again. But she dares to do it again. "That's true." Chu Tianfeng nodded. Meng Qi looked at the 2 of them in surprise. Qin Xiumor and Chu Tianfeng's hostility towards Lu Qingran was too obvious. It didn't seem like the kind of hostility that was born out of love. Instead, it seemed like there was some kind of deep hatred. "This shouldn't be. Meng Qi." Chu Tianfeng turned to look at Meng Qi. "Meng Qi, why did everyone start calling her Meng Qi? Let's go and expose Lu Qingran." Chu Tianfeng said, "You were the one who came up with this idea, so we can't let her get away with it. You should be the one earning the spirit stones." As he spoke, he stood up eagerly. "Let's go compete with her and snatch the business." Meng Qi wanted to roll his eyes at him. Since when could treating illnesses be equated with business? Moreover, if he relied on this method to earn spirit stones, he wouldn't even be able to raise little Qi. He would have to rely on something else. However, she still intended to take a look. "I'll go take a look." She stood up as well. The cultivators injured by the divine devouring vines were innocent. If it was really Lu Qingran, she would not be at ease. "Okay." Chu Tianfeng quickly followed. Qin Xiumor also followed. Su Junmo listened to the 3 of them mumbling for a while, but he still didn't understand what was going on. Seeing this, he also followed them. Only Murong Fei and Wen He were left in the main hall. The 2 of them looked at each other, feeling somewhat baffled. Meng Qi. Seeing that only the 4 of them were left in the main hall, Su Junmo heaved a sigh of relief. He hurriedly moved to Meng Qi's side. "Your senior martial sister is also here? What do you mean by snatching the business you were talking about? I noticed earlier that your relationship with your senior martial sister isn't very good. Could it be that there's something else going on? I think your senior martial sister is not bad. She's pretty, filial, and kind. In order to protect her master, she bravely stood up for her. Of course, it's wrong for her to suspect you, Meng Qi, but this is also human nature. If it were my elders who were being reprimanded, I wouldn't be able to help but speak up for them too. Yes, she's very pretty, very kind, and very nice." Qin Xiumor casually added, "If you like her, then go chase after her." "Yes, yes." Chu Tianfeng also said, "If you miss out on such a good girl, it might be very difficult for you to meet someone like her in the future. Fellow Daoist Su, go chase after her. You can do it." "I suspect that you're tricking me." Su Junmo snorted softly. "Meng Qi, of course I'm on your side unconditionally, but I don't think there's anything wrong with your senior martial sister. Is there some misunderstanding between the 2 of you? If there's any misunderstanding, it's fine. Just leave it to me. I'll help you clear up the misunderstanding. It's not easy for everyone to learn from the same master. It's fine as long as the misunderstanding is cleared up. What do you think?" "There's no misunderstanding." Meng Qi said, "Lu Qingran and I just don't get along. One was the Heavenly Tao's favorite, and the other was an unlucky scapegoat. They were born to be enemies." Speaking of hatred, she really didn't dislike Lu Qingran. Really? Su Junmo was stunned. We're not tricking you. Qin Xiaomor said, children who like to cry and throw tantrums are always more favored. There's nothing else. You don't have to worry about us. Su Junmo looked at the two of them suspiciously. She still felt that the two of them were up to no good. Even Meng Qi looked at the two of them in surprise. She had already felt that Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiaomor's attitude towards her after her rebirth was very different from her previous life, probably because there were no misunderstandings in this life. Meng Qi wasn't surprised that their attitude towards her had changed. Meng Qi's medical skills had already broken through to the 5th grade before she died in her previous life. There weren't any shortcuts in her medical skills. She took it one step at a time. She was truly a 5th grade medical practitioner who had saved countless lives. The people she cured, as long as they had nothing to do with Lu Qingran, were also very grateful to her. For example, the ordinary residents of Qingfeng town. When Meng Qi thought of these people, her heart became warm, and her gaze gradually became gentle. So, did she make the right choice in this life? Although she still saved these male cultivators who were entangled with Lu Qingran, because she received money and cut off karma, she didn't snatch the luck of her senior sister, the darling of the heavenly Tao. Big huge. Name everything became better. As for why Qin Xiaomor and Chu Tianfeng were dissatisfied with Lu Qingran, Meng Qi only thought about it for a moment before throwing it to the back of her mind. This had nothing to do with her. It didn't matter if they liked it, hated it because of love, or were depressed and perverted because they couldn't get what they wanted. It had nothing to do with her. What she wanted to know more now was about the Medical Cultivation Dharma Assembly. Thinking of the Wind Alliance's library that Xue Chengxian mentioned, Meng Qi's heart itched. She wanted to go. So she had to work hard. She completely blocked out the argument of Chu Tianfeng and the other two. Meng Qi didn't hear what they said later at all. She walked very quickly. The Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa's courtyard in Huajiang Mansion was quite big and occupied the best street in Huajiang Mansion. Meng Qi walked from the main hall to the room where the injured cultivators were placed. It was enough time for Su Junmo and Chu Tianfeng to repeatedly discuss whether Lu Qingran was worth pursuing or not. She turned a deaf ear to them and went forward to knock on the door. The door quickly opened with a creak, and a man in his 30s who was also wearing the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa's disciple uniform walked out. May I ask who you are? The man sized up Meng Qi and was a little surprised by the unfamiliar girl who suddenly appeared in the courtyard. However, he soon saw Su Junmo. Fellow Daoist Su. The man took 2 steps forward and bowed to Su Junmo, who had already quieted down. Fellow Daoist, Li Anhe of the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa is very grateful for your presence. Su Junmo nodded at him. Fellow Daoist Li, you're too polite. He paused and said, I came with Brother Xue. After all, the divine devouring vine is from the demon realm. Yes. Li Anhe nodded. This fellow Daoist wants to see the injured cultivators. Su Junmo pointed at Meng Qi. Is it convenient? Of course. Li Anhe hurriedly stepped aside. His attitude toward Meng Qi was completely different from before. Fellow Daoist, please. Meng Qi nodded at him and quickly walked into the room. She couldn't help but frown as soon as she stepped into the room. The strong sweet fragrance of white peaches instantly surrounded her. It was so intoxicating that it made it difficult for her to breathe. The Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa definitely had a Dharma treasure that could seal one's aura. Otherwise, it was impossible that she couldn't smell a trace of aura outside the door. How many people are injured? Meng Qi asked. There are a total of 67 people. 4 of them are placed here, and there are a few more in the room. The rest are sent to the middle of the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa. There is a cave that completely isolates the spirit qi. Before fellow Daoist Xue went to Burnt City, he instructed us to place the lightly injured cultivators there. The condition of the people there is better than the people in the villa. Li Anhe didn't hide Meng Qi's problem for Su Junmo's sake. He frowned. I went back to visit them last night. They also, he shook his head lightly and sighed. These injured people were not disciples of the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa. Huajiang Manor was at the foot of the Mystic Cloud Mountain Villa. According to the rules of the Trichilia Chasm, the mystic Cloud Mountain Villa should be responsible for the safety of this place. The injured cultivators were also their responsibility. Yes. Meng Qi nodded. The fragrance of 3 cultivators was so strong. It was far stronger than the smell around Lan Zhuxian and the others when they were injured. She frowned and quickly walked forward. There were 2 rooms. The deeper Meng Qi walked, the stronger the smell. Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumo, who followed her in, also frowned. Just the smell alone was enough to make people feel extremely uncomfortable. Li Anhe also frowned and said, ever since they moved in, the fragrance here has become stronger. He shook his head and said, 2 fellow Taoists passed by Huajiang Manor this morning. They said they smelled the scent of the injured divine devouring vines, so they came to help us treat them. Meng Qi nodded. She quickly passed through the room and entered the bedroom. Xue Chengxian heard the sound and turned to look at her. Seeing Meng Qi, he smiled at her and gestured for her to keep quiet. In the room, 3 bamboo beds were arranged in a triangle. On the ground in the middle of the 3 beds, there was a small bronze cauldron. Light pink smoke rose from the small cauldron. The fragrance in the bedroom should be stronger, but the sweet fragrance of white peaches was dispelled by the light and slightly bitter medicinal fragrance. It was not as good as outside. Meng Qi stared at the small cauldron for a while. She felt that it was somewhat familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen it before. She turned to look at the corner of the room. There were 2 chairs there, and a man and a woman were sitting side by side. The female cultivator on the left was about 20 years old. Her green hair was like a waterfall, and it was held up by a small pearl hairpin. She was wearing a light yellow dress that accentuated her slender waist. Even though she was sitting down, she still looked slender and graceful. Moreover, she had a very beautiful face. When the female cultivator met Meng Qi's gaze, her palm-sized face instantly paled. Her long and thick eyelashes trembled a few times. She seemed to be trying her best to squeeze out a smile. Junior sister Meng Qi. This person was Lu Qingran. Sitting next to Lu Qingran was a man in a black robe. He was wearing a bamboo hat on his head. A black veil hung down from both sides of the bamboo hat, completely covering his face. His exposed hands were slender, but they were abnormally pale. The male cultivator also turned his head to Meng Qi. She could not see his expression and gazed through the veil. She could only see that the male cultivator's fingers, which were originally lazily placed on the armrest of the chair, suddenly bent slightly and tapped the armrest somewhat casually. Qin Xiumo had already stood next to Meng Qi in an instant. His fingers hanging by his side were forming a seal. His life-bound long sword would break through the air and attack the other party at any time. Qin Xiumo did not know this person, but he instinctively felt that the black-clothed man next to Lu Qingran was very dangerous. A chuckle escaped from behind the black veil. It was the man who was laughing. When Xue Chengxian heard Lu Qingran call Meng Qi that way, he looked at the 2 in surprise. You. He silently mouthed to Meng Qi. Are you from the same sect? We used to be, Meng Qi said lightly in a low voice. She was still looking at the small cauldron that was emitting light pink smoke. What was this? She took a breath. The slightly bitter and astringent medicinal smell, mixed with a little bit of the sweet fragrance of white peaches, gave her an indescribably strange feeling. What exactly was it? Meng Qi turned to look at Xue Chengxian. Since this knowledgeable medical cultivator of the Wind Alliance did not react, he should be harmless. But she felt a little strange, as if she had seen this thing somewhere before, but she could not remember now. This is the powder on the wings of the Kanglan purple butterfly, mixed with the 300-year-old silk twining fruit, Tianluo crystal, and... The man in the bamboo hat suddenly spoke. The powder refined from the ascetic bamboo. His voice was very pleasant, but also very cold. Like a cold jade striking a stone, when it reached people's ears, they could feel a trace of coldness rising from the wound on their back. He seemed to be looking at Meng Qi. Is my method effective? Without waiting for Meng Qi to answer, Xue Chengxian had already spoken. Just the powder refined from the first 3 herbs can be burned to drive away most of the exotic birds. With the addition of the ascetic bamboo, the effect will double. It's just that no one has ever tested whether this thing is effective on the divine devouring vine. Ha! That male cultivator sneered. You'll know once you try. He knocked on the armrest again and said casually, otherwise, when you hunt the 5-element green crane, these cultivators can wait, but the divine devouring vine can't. It's just a pile of fertilizer. It doesn't matter if you save it or not. Meng Qi, not only this small cauldron, even the tone of the man's voice was somewhat familiar. Did she meet him in her previous life? Why did she not remember at all? There were many men walking around Lu Qingran, and Meng Qi actually did not know all of them. However, with such a pleasant voice and such a cold and harsh tone, she would definitely remember them if she met them. So, the male cultivator stood up as he spoke. He was very tall. Xue Chengxian was already quite tall. However, even without the bamboo hat, this person was still slightly taller than Xue Chengxian. We don't need you here anymore. As he spoke, he turned his head and extended a hand to Lu Qingran. Let's go. Xue Chengshuan's expression changed slightly, but he did not say anything. In the end, the mystic Cloud Mountain Villa had nothing to do with the Wind Alliance. It was just that they were both in the West World. The other party had asked for help, and they were injured by the divine devouring vine, which they had never seen before. The Wind Alliance would naturally lend a helping hand. He stared at the male cultivator who refused to show his true face, and then looked at Lu Qingran. He had just heard her call Meng Qi junior sister. Regardless of whether or not they had been apprentice sisters in the past, the two definitely came from the same sect. In other words, they both came from the Eastern Jie. Of the 3,000 worlds and 4 Jie, it had never been said which Jie was strong enough to crush the other 3. However, for thousands of years, medical cultivators were recognized as the strongest in the Western Jie. The Wind Alliance was even more outstanding. He had not gone to the Eastern Jie for many years. This Eastern Jie that bordered both the Yarrow and Mo Jie had been suppressed and developed the slowest because of this, had produced such young and powerful Shouja. Xue Chengxian turned to look at Meng Qi. Meng Qi was looking at Lu Qingran. Lu Qingran hesitated and then slowly raised her hand and gently placed it on the man's pale palm. She lowered her head and slowly stood up, not willing to look at Meng Qi again. She followed behind the man and slowly walked out the door. When the two passed by Meng Qi, Qin Shomor lightly snorted and stepped forward to protect Meng Qi. He looked warily at the black-robed man. That feeling of danger became more and more obvious as the other came closer. As if feeling his master's nervousness, Qin Shomor's life-bond long sword suddenly hummed and appeared at his side. The long sword floated, the tip flashing with cold light. The man also turned his head in Qin Shomor's direction. Ha! He snorted again. A bit interesting. The man suddenly raised his hand and flicked his finger. He did not move quickly. While Qin Shomor had not recovered, he still had the strength of a Jindan Shouja. Even more, he had started to forge his life-bond longsword when he entered Juji. In these years, it had never left him for even a moment. The man and the sword were mentally connected. Even when he had not recovered, the sect leader of Cool Breeze Valley, whose cultivation was higher than his, could only stop him once with a talisman. But in front of the black-robed man, Qin Shomor was like a child playing house with a wooden sword. Just like that, the man slowly raised his hand, slowly flicked his fingers, and tapped lightly. His pale and slender fingers looked a bit sickly, and even a bit weak. But they steadily and accurately bounced off the tip of the sword. Qin Shomor could not avoid it at all. Qin Shomor suddenly gave a muffled grunt, a thread of blood slipping down the corner of his mouth. Meng Qi stilled. Ha ha, the black-robed man was already laughing and shaking his head. You are still far from it. For the sake of your grandmaster, I will spare your life and your life-bond longsword today. Next time you dare to be so rude, don't blame this seat for being merciless. When the black-robed man did this, he was still holding Lu Qingran's hand. She didn't dare to move at all. She quickly raised her eyes and glanced at Qin Shomor. Let's go. The black-robed man gripped her hand even tighter and led her out of the room. The room was still quiet even after the two of them disappeared out the door. Lianhe didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Profound Cloud Mountain Villa was a sword cultivation sect. All sword cultivators would refine their life bond long swords. He was a discerning person. If Qin Xiumo's life bond longsword was placed in profound Cloud Mountain Villa, he would definitely be invincible among his peers. When the black-robed man and Lu Qingran said they could save people, he didn't pay much attention to the other. He didn't expect him to be so powerful. Xue Chengxian slowly exhaled. Su Junmo's expression was solemn. This person, he shook his head. Judging from his voice, he shouldn't be very old. To have such cultivation at such an age, so powerful. From birth, the heavenly Yarrow could use the shadow of stars on their bodies to continuously absorb the spirit energy around them and cultivate without stopping. Su Junmo could reach Yuanying at such an age. Among the 3,000 worlds, he was already an outstanding genius. Even so, he couldn't sense the cultivation of this mysterious man whose voice didn't sound much older than his own. So powerful. This was already Su Junmo's extremely high evaluation. Su Junmo turned to look at Qin Xiumo and looked sympathetically at the blood flowing from the corner of his lips. But didn't he just say it was for the sake of your grandmaster? Just like that, he actually damaged your life bond long sword. In his shock, he almost forgot to maintain his image as a noble young master. He murmured, he didn't use any spells. You, Meng Qi, Chu Tianfeng, Brother Xue. Did you see him make a spell? I saw that he just raised his hand and flicked it. His strength could easily crush a Jindan Xiuzhe. This is a split spirit. No. Maybe it's an even more powerful one, right? Su Junmo didn't stop nagging. Qin Xiumo, he just said your grandmaster. Who is your grandmaster? Why didn't he kill you for the sake of your grandmaster? Can you feel it? Did he say it on purpose to scare you, or did he really show mercy? Were you on guard just now? Did you resist? Or is it because your internal injuries haven't healed yet? Qin Xiumo, F*** King Chatterbox. Meng Qi had already taken out a small porcelain bottle from his storage bag and handed it to him. Take this first. Okay. Qin Xiumo stuffed the medicine in the porcelain bottle into his mouth without hesitation. Although he was injured, there was a bit of joy on his face. You gave me medicine again. He swallowed the medicine in his mouth and then said, I still don't have money, I owe you. Meng Qi, that person is really powerful, Meng Qi said and looked up at Qin Xiumo's natal sword. The sword was still floating in the air, but it looked a bit dim. He was merciful. Qin Xiumo said, he stopped in the end. Otherwise, my natal sword would have been hit back into my body by him. In that case, your cultivation level would directly fall back to the foundation establishment stage. He narrowed his eyes and said slowly. Meng Qi didn't say anything. She quickly searched through her memories, but still couldn't remember. She shouldn't have no impression of such a powerful person by Lu Qingran's side. Ah! At this time, the 3 injured Xiuzhe in the room suddenly groaned. They had been injured for a long time, and the divine devouring vines in their bodies had absorbed all their spirit energy and started to take over their consciousness. The man's words were a bit harsh, but if these people continued to develop, they would really be no different from flower pots. Li Anhe was overjoyed and rushed forward. The 3 Xiuzhe all slowly opened their eyes. Although they still looked a bit dazed, their eyes slowly regained their spirit. They were no longer blank and numb like before, as if they were walking corpses. How do you feel, fellow Taoists? Li Anhe asked. Ah. A male Xiuzhe in his 40s slowly exhaled. Where am I? Ah. He suddenly shouted in horror, I remember now. He was extremely shocked and was about to jump up from the bamboo bed. Just as he lifted his body, he fell back down again. Why do I have no strength at all? Where's my spirit energy? Why is my spirit energy gone? When he shouted like this, the other 2 also panicked and checked the condition of their bodies. My spirit energy is gone too. My spiritual ocean is empty. I've never experienced such a situation since I started cultivating qi. What exactly happened? Where's my spirit energy? The room instantly became noisy. The 3 injured Xiuzhe's voice was hoarse, but in their anxiety, they did not care about the condition of their bodies. They struggled to get up from the bed. Li Anhe could not persuade them, so he could only turn to Xue Chengxian for help. Don't panic. Shui Chengxian stepped forward and comforted them. I'm Shui Chengxian from the Wind Alliance. You were injured by the divine devouring vine earlier, so now you should. Hey! Shui Chengxian suddenly turned and called Meng Qi. Fellow Daoist Meng, come and take a look. Was it the same for the people you cured earlier? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.